went under the wheels.
Perfected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Gabe.
And in today's episode, we're talking about Wonder Woman 1984 and Invisible Man. We're going to end the year by talking about the start of 2020 and the end of 2020. I'm very excited about this.
Oh yeah, that's right. I didn't even think about that.
I know, I just thought of it right
For
now.
our audience's reference, we're recording this on the very first day of 2021, the year that is guaranteed to be better than 2020 somehow.
Nebulously referred to as, it can't get worse than 2020, can it? Oh God, it can get worse than 2020. We just don't want to think about it.
Anyone who's lived at any other time of history will tell you it can definitely get worse than 2020.
Oh God. I'm like, during World War I, didn't they have like the pandemic with the Spanish flu and then lead into World War I? Like,
World War I was wrapping up, and then they had the Spanish flu. So yeah, they had in 1918 they had the Spanish flu pandemic and World War I at the same time, which is obviously not a good time for anybody.
Especially with
I think the Armenian genocide also happened that year, and Germany was blamed for World War I for some reason, which eventually led to Hitler, but that took a little while. So we'll see. Maybe 15 years from now we'll have a new Hitler. I don't know.
Oh God, don't even. Oh no. I just want to I would love for the pandemic to be the worst thing that happens in my life. Now that's also a double-edged jinx, because if I die tomorrow, it's like, hey, guess what, Matt? You got your wish. It's like, that's not what I meant. Oh God, speaking of wishes, oh no. Oh God, that would almost be a natural segue into our first movie, but it's not, because it's actually going to be an unnatural segue into Gabe. What have you been watching lately?
Well, let's see. What happened?
Like
I've been watching a lot of movies lately. Just enjoying a lot of time off during the holidays. But let's see. I rewatched Bronson and Elf.
Is Bronson on anywhere, or do you own it on Blu-ray or DVD?
I just rented it.
Okay.
My girlfriend wanted to see it because I talked it up so much, so we decided to watch it.
She wanted to see the Tom Hardy penis.
She wasn't
Which, who
prepared
doesn't?
for that. I didn't give her any kind of indication of the tone or what, get ready for X, Y, or Z. Just, this movie's really
dimensions
good.
of Tom Hardy's dick. X, Y, and Z. What did she think?
She really liked it. She thought it was really good. Yeah, and it holds up. It's still a masterpiece, I think. Tom Hardy's performance is just 100% committed and absolutely brilliant. A lot of the stylistic choices that Refn makes are really clever. And, it is definitely kind of that transition movie between sort of the gritty, almost punk feel of the Pusher movies to the more slick and polished and abstract movies that he made later, like Valhalla Rising and Only God Forgives, and so on and so on. So yeah, it's still great. Elf also surprisingly holds up, because I had only seen it in theaters and then on Christmas. So that's a lot of time for me to think, I was, that came out in 2004? Something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, something like that. 2004, 2005.
Yeah, so I was 9 when that movie came out. And, I really liked it when I saw it in the theater. But, I'm thinking I was 9. I'm obviously a different person now. I don't know if I'll enjoy it or if I'll find it funny or anything. But it's actually still really good. It's a fun, family movie and very entertaining.
Jon Favreau, man. Jon Favreau saving your holiday movies.
I know. Thank you, Jon Favreau.
Hashtag he can fix it.
Ugh. Moving on from Jon Favreau.
Yes.
I also watched The Breadwinner, which is an animated movie from the Irish studio Cartoon Saloon. I really like let's see, what is it? The Secret of Kells, which is I think Cartoon Saloon's first movie. So I was interested to see this one because it got so much acclaim, and yeah, the Breadwinner is really good. It's the animation is beautiful. It kind of switches off between like the world of the story or the world of the movie, and then the characters in the movie tell a story to each other that gets dropped in installments as the movie goes on. And the animation in that is also really good and very like clever and creative, how they how they convey different things. And I think one of the most interesting things about it is that it is a kids movie. It is rated PG. It is targeted towards children, but it is unremittingly bleak.
Kind of like the Irish.
Well, it's just like, you'd think like, okay, it's a kids movie. It's going to have lots of like silly jokes and stuff like that. And I mean, from what I remember, the Secret of Kells is a pretty fanciful movie. It's got lots of like fantasy elements, and the main characters are children, and it is definitely a kids movie, but the tone is actually pretty serious. Nothing like too traumatizing happens or anything, but it's got a fairly straight, serious tone to it. Breadwinner also has a very straight, serious tone to it, but it's also incredibly dark because it's about like the horrors of life under the Taliban and like
Oh wow.
early 2000s Afghanistan. So it's really fascinating how they kind of walk the tightrope of like, this is a kids movie, and also it's extremely depressing and dark and kind of scary maybe if you're a kid seeing this. But it's really good. I would recommend it to anyone. And I think, kids should watch it with their parents. It's probably not best for kids to watch by themselves, because they'll be like, I think not just like, oh, this is sad or this is scary, but also just like they're going to be confused by a lot of shit. And, it might help to have a parent to be like, well, this is like another culture where this is the norm, therefore, and explain a lot of the things that maybe kids might not get right away. And then the last movie I watched is this obscure Iranian movie I'd never heard of called The Song of Sparrows, which is about this guy whose daughter's hearing aid breaks, so he goes through he sort of like stumbles into a series of schemes to try and make money to buy her a new one after losing his job as like an ostrich farmer. And like as he makes more and more money through these various schemes, he becomes more and more greedy and sort of forgets about his family and just focuses on like acquiring wealth and material possessions and crap, which is mostly in the form of like junk. And then, stuff happens and he kind of has like he learns to let go of all of that and focus more on his family again. It's good though. It's interesting because it's about like very poor people living very desperate lives, but the tone is like very silly. Like, I think if this was made by an American, it would be just milked as like poverty porn and like, oh, look at how horrible people's lives are in like rural Iran. But the tone of the movie is like, oh, isn't this like farmer guy silly? Doesn't he do silly, wacky shit? And then when he goes to the city, when he goes to Tehran, it's like, oh, aren't city people also weird? So it's actually pretty entertaining.
It's like an insider's view on how they view their own culture. Is that
yeah, because there's a lot of like in jokes that you would only get, I think, if you're Persian. Because like the main character is Azeri, and there's a lot of people from Azerbaijan who live in Iran, and they're sort of looked at as like kind of these naive, buffoonish simpletons by Persians. Like that's how they're stereotyped. I guess the one, like, I'm trying to think of how we would think of that. I mean, Persian people kind of look at Azerbaijani people the same way that Americans, like urban Americans, would look at like rednecks, or the way that like French people think of Belgians.
I was gonna say French people think of the rest of the world, but yeah, okay.
I mean, so there's a lot of humor that relies on like those kinds of stereotypes of like rural people versus city people, Azerbaijanis versus Persians. But it's funny because, you know, I watched it with my girlfriend and her family, and her grandma is, well, her grandfather is Azerbaijani, and he and her grandma used to live in one of these kind of rural villages a ways outside of any big city. And her grandma just loved the movie because apparently the guy reminded her of her husband, which, you know, was funny.
That's cool. No, that's cool. That's interesting. Like I do like, that's one of the reasons I like foreign films, is because you get a completely different view than you would in American movies. And that's why I think people are disappointed when they watch the foreign version of a movie and then they watch the American version and they Americanize everything. And people are like, well, how dare they Americanize this foreign movie? And it's like, well, yeah, but that's the purpose of making an American version of it, is to apply the American values to it, which is why it's kind of unnecessary to make American versions of foreign movies. But
Oh, absolutely. Because it's like a lot of the context in the movie would be lost on someone like me who doesn't really understand the culture that way, or like kind of the embedded idioms and stereotypes and things like that. And then that, yeah, if there was an American adaptation, all that would have to be changed to American idioms and stereotypes. And I think if you were a fan of the original movie, you're absolutely right. Like, you'd be like, oh, why'd they change all this? That was unnecessary. But an American audience wouldn't understand it.
Yeah. Well, like, so to your point, I think that's one of the fun parts, is not understanding the idioms and just sort of like going with the flow of the movie. That's one of the reasons I like foreign movies. The other thing is, I will say that as a fan of American movies and foreign films, I like it when there are foreign remakes of American movies. I don't know why, but like, there was a Japanese version of Unforgiven.
Hollywood remakes.
No, not necessarily, but I'm all about those Asian remakes of American movies. Like, I haven't.
India cranks out so many remakes of American movies that like not, and they'll do remakes of like bad American movies. Like they'll remake White House Down and set it in India. You know.
See, that's the one I've never really gotten into, the Indian film market. I haven't gotten into Bollywood really, and I'm curious and tempted to, but I feel like you need to have, like, this is completely counterintuitive to everything I've just said, but I almost feel like I need to have like a tour guide as I'm watching those movies, just because I'll be like, that's an interesting place for a song. Also, just to know which are good and which are bad, because Bollywood comes out with so many movies. Like America, maybe like 5% are just really good, and then the other 95% are probably just completely forgettable, but also very long. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a decent number of Bollywood movies, and they all range from not so good to okay.
Yeah.
So that's not very encouraging, but
it's 1940s Hollywood all over again. Welcome to 2020 Bollywood. We're gonna come out with another Bollywood version of a film noir because it's cheap to make and gets butts in the seat, or used to get butts in the seats. That's cool though. I need to expand my international viewing. So that's good.
I usually try to stick to like countries that consistently produce good movies, or movies that I like. So it'd be like Japan, France, Russia, Iran,
New Zealand.
and New Zealand. Well, New Zealand films are in English, so it's fine. I'm talking about like non-English language.
Got it. Quote foreign film, unquote.
Hong Kong, South Korea, and yeah, it's kind of it. I mean, you know, Mexico a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the rest is like, well, you know, we'll see. Remains to be seen. I mean, I didn't mention Germany, but I love every Wim Wenders movie I've ever seen, but I think that may be more just that Wenders is really good, as opposed to like German cinema in general is really good. Although, you know, I've seen a number of good German movies.
Yeah. Other cultures, they have such a limited budget, but it's also like more financed by government, so they can, I'm sure that I was going to make some sort of parallel, but there really isn't a parallel there. It's just I guess like the best will out, which is why there are so many David Cronenberg movies that are made in Canada. It's like, I'm a Canadian filmmaker, I can do something good. Comes along Brandon and David Cronenberg, and they're like, can you do better than this?
I think it's also like in other countries, not all other countries, but in other civilized countries, the government tends to work for the people. In the United States, the government hates the people. Like, I think it's weird because, like, you know, our officials are in place because of democracy, but I think they resent the fact that democracy exists. Like, if only I was here without people having to vote for me somehow.
Yeah, I get that feeling. I get that feeling a lot as well.
So what have you been watching lately?
I have been kind of like you. I've been watching a lot, but I'm gonna just kind of go quickly through. I'm actually gonna use the movies that you spoke about as kind of a template for mine. Speaking on Jon Favreau, I rewatched Chef, which is not that. I love Chef. I think Chef's a great lighthearted movie. It's like the perfect encapsulation of what Favreau does well and what he does poorly. But Netflix also has a show that Favreau does with Roy Choi called Chef's Show. And since I have a lot of time to kill at my job, I watch Chef's Show, and it's a lot of fun. And it makes me really want to have a grilled cheese sandwich or a Cubano or some of Roy Choi's cooking. So do you know who Roy Choi is?
Yeah, he's the Kogi truck guy.
Yep.
If you're wondering why are expensive food trucks everywhere now, it's because Roy Choi did it like 15 years ago and it became a trend.
Yep. Yeah, God, so long ago. I still miss Kogi. Like they constantly say on the show when Roy Choi is like taking a bunch of random ingredients and mixing it together with like a ton of butter and oil, and he'll like take this spice and that spice, and Favreau will take a bite of food and he'll be like, "Oh, that's that Roy Choi flavor." And I'm like, dude, you know what? I miss that Roy Choi flavor. I think the furthest east he got was he has a restaurant. This is ironic. He has a restaurant in Las Vegas at a hotel that I stayed at for someone's bachelor party, but I don't think the restaurant was opened at the time, and I didn't know about it. And if I had known about it, I would have gone there because he's got things like a fried bologna sandwich, a street dog that's got bacon, and like all of this good like Roy Choi flavoring to it. And he's got all of this great stuff there. And I was like, dude, I can't believe I missed out on it just because I wasn't just paying enough attention to it. But Chef Show, if you need some background noise, it's kind of cool because Favreau will get like guest stars and friends he knows on it. Like Bill Burr came on and they made the grilled cheese sandwich and the Cubano. He had Sam Raimi on and they were talking about making sourdough bread, and Sam Raimi was like messing with them the whole time. It was pretty entertaining. Robert Rodriguez, he just like goes on about his own cooking for like 30 minutes, and at one point like Favreau just turns to Roy Choi and he's just like, he's so full of bullshit right now. It's pretty funny. So
that's so funny.
Yeah,
when you're finished with that and you want another good food show on Netflix, check out Chef's Table.
Okay, I've seen it pop up.
Yeah, I mean it's more focused on like fine dining type of food, but it's a good show, and the filmmaking in it is actually really good. Like it's if you want to put your film and media studies degree to use, watch Chef's Table.
I think I tried watching it one time, but there's something so comforting about Jon Favreau and Roy Choi, who look like buddies that are just hanging out, going around America, like trying different foods. And then they're like, all right, well, we got to repay this guy. So Roy Choi gets in the kitchen and makes like a meal that's way better than anything they've eaten. And it's just like, it's like watching Kung Fu, but like with cooking instead. So that's why, that's why I've been enjoying Chef's Show. I will take a look at Chef's Table though, because I apparently I hate myself and I like to look at all of this food that I can't eat. So
yeah, I would say if you want to start with a random episode of Chef's Table, start with the Francis Mallman episode. It's like if someone made Valhalla Rising about cooking.
Ooh, okay, I'm in. I'll check it out. I also am going to check out The Breadwinner. Which, speaking of The Breadwinner, I watched Soul, the new Disney Pixar movie, and it was good. It was I think someone described watching Soul the way I describe Pixar movies. I wasn't that interested, but by the end of the movie, I was completely invested. So I mean, you kind of know what you're getting when you go into a Pixar movie. They're going to try and make you cry in the last 10 minutes of the movie with a lot of well-earned sentimentality, good storytelling. And Jamie Foxx is really good. I think his ego gets in the way of him being like one of those cream of the crop top tier, but he's a really good voice actor in addition to like just being a good performer and a good actor. So yeah, I enjoyed Soul. It took some turns that I wasn't sure it was going to go. And music by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, not Atticus Finch.
Oh
Atticus
God!
Ross.
Did they make Trent Reznor do more jazz music?
No, they actually one of the night shows. They brought that guy in, one of those late night. I don't know. I don't remember exactly which one, but they got him to come in and do the jazz. So then when it gets to, it's weird because when it gets to the soul world area that they're in, like all of the music gets all like techie and stuff, and I was like, this sounds more like Daniel Pemberton than Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor, but it was still cool. The music's good, the visuals are good, the camera work is like, it's crazy how far we've come in CG camera work.
Yeah,
just the way.
Thanks, Roger Deakins.
Yeah, someone was talking about WALL-E the other day, and they're like, I couldn't get through WALL-E, and I'm like, but without WALL-E, we wouldn't have such a realistic camera in CG movies.
Do we need realistic camera in CG movies though?
So like Inside Out and Soul are very similar. Did you see Inside Out?
Nope. So here's the thing with Pixar movies.
Yeah.
I like them all pretty much categorically. Like I can't think of one I really hated.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like I don't want to watch any because I know what I'm getting into. It's just like,
Right.
oh, cartoon characters go on an adventure. There's some fun. There's some laughs, and then the fucking like manipulative sentimentality where they just like cry now, bitch. I'm sick of it. Like I don't need you to try and force me into crying because it's gross. It's gross, it's manipulative, and it's like this kind of, it's like a fake catharsis in a way. Like I watched Coco maybe a year or so ago. Yeah. And it's a good movie. It's fun, it's funny, it's got some neat twists and turns, and there's nothing sad or sentimental about it at all, even though it's about death, weirdly. And then like 5 minutes before the credits roll, he sings the song to the grandma, and then this music just washes over, and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like they tried to save like an entire film's worth of waterworks for the last 5 minutes, and it broke my immersion with the rest of the
You're
movie.
done.
It was like,
you're just done
it's like,
with
I'm
it.
done. This feels completely out of place. This is ridiculous, So like my favorite Pixar movies are The Incredibles and The Incredibles 2 because they make no attempt whatsoever, and Ratatouille because they make no attempt whatsoever to be sad or sappy or emotional or cathartic at all. They're just like, oh, it's a fun cartoon, yay.
Yeah, I know that Pixar's definitely been leaning heavier into like the whole like, okay, not only do we need to make you cry, we need you to have like a revelation about how depressing your life is in the last 5 minutes. I like Coco, and I think they do a good job of storytelling because the bad guy in that movie, he's revealed halfway through the movie, right when I was like, God, I think the bad guy's going to be that one dude. It's like they're good at sort of figuring out where like people are going to start getting kind of tired with something or bored with something. And again, there's the moment in Soul that's, sort of like the depressing downer moment, but like the reason I brought up Inside Out and Soul is because they have two very distinct worlds, and so having two distinct visual styles helps a lot, just kind of for fun, because the character designs in the real world for the characters are really bad, which almost turned me off of the movie completely. But having that sort of like realistic camera work, kind of like a hazy camera, it helps with like the message they're trying to tell about the real world and kind of understanding where inspiration or spark for life or this kind of thing is. And then having kind of like the goofy, like normal CG camera, like, animated camera in the Soul world works really well. Yeah, I understand about like the whole manipulation thing. and how it's like, oh, I'm so tired of like Pixar trying to tug at my heartstrings so much. And like that's why like when it's a Pixar movie, you kind of already know what you're getting into, unless it's directed by Brad Bird, which you know what you're getting into in a different way. But I mean,
Yeah.
there's still good enough storytellers, especially in like the way that they introduce concepts, like concepts that would hard to be explained, and introducing kind of like action or adventure type elements that, and you know, they're one of the few studios that is able to reach a general audience as opposed to like, this is a kids movie, you know. This is because like a lot of the subject matter that they're talking about now has nothing to do with like children meditating on themes of life, death, soul, coming to your own purpose, wondering if life does have a purpose. So you know, it's good. It's like a low, shiny, and chrome if you're into that kind of thing. It's, you know, I'd give it between
Okay.
a high witness and a low, shiny, and chrome.
I mean, I think
Jamie Foxx is fun.
what you were saying. It's like you know what you're getting into. I think that's the problem. I don't want to know what I'm getting into.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like you can have like that sort of over the top, sappy sentimentality and have it work.
Yeah.
Or like,
yeah.
like every Pixar movie post Up is trying to be Ratatouille with Up level crying at some point. Whereas like Up works because sappy sentimentality is like the central theme of the movie.
Right. Right.
You know, and it's like these you know tear jerking events are you know, they hang over the whole story. And Carl, is that the old man?
Yeah.
Like Carl's sentimentality in some ways is what's kind of holding him back from living his life, and the fact that he sits around crying all the time. So it works. It works in that case. Yes, is it manipulative? Absolutely. But
especially
it works
the first
it's
10
like
minutes. Yeah.
it's integrated into the movie. And I think the other ways in which that could work is like, you know, you can kind of have it come out of nowhere as long as you're not expecting it, or if there's like a decent enough lead up to it. But if it's like it's, I don't want to go into a Pixar movie thing like, okay, it's a Pixar movie, they're going to try and make me cry, and then just waiting for them to do it, and it kind of distracts from the fun of everything else that's going on, you know? Because like it's on some level, like Coco's really good, but it's almost hard to enjoy how good it is, because in the back of my mind I'm thinking like, all right, is this the part where they're going to try and make me cry, or is this the part? Is this the part, or is this the part? And then the part comes, and I just like, I want to barf.
I mean, I agree with you. I think the other thing about Pixar is that they take concepts that you wouldn't think would be in a movie and make it digestible. Like Inside Out is all about living with depression, and like how depression comes on, and how we kind of deal with it, but in a different way, and how, you know, like,
so
you
Inside
have to have
Out
the
is
highs.
basically just Manchester by the Sea.
No. Inside Out is at least watchable. But like as like a person who likes to dabble in art, Soul is interesting because it's like, well, does what we do in life, do we really have a purpose? You know, like what is our obsession with like making sure our life has a purpose? And like, that's interesting. They ask kind of interesting questions and put it in a format that's digestible. Now with something like Onward, which I enjoyed, it's Onward. If you're going to skip one movie because of emotional manipulation, skip Onward.
Well, I mean, just the trailer for Onward looks like the poster boy for emotional manipulation, the movie. I mean,
yeah,
I think I've said this before, but Pixar movies since 2010 are mostly, what is it? It's pornography designed
emotion
to
porn,
jerk tears. And
yeah, that's Onward. Soul. People who are like, "Oh man, I cried so much for Soul." Not as much. I didn't think as much. I didn't feel as much for that. But yeah. But go ahead. I'm sorry to the rest of your point.
Oh no, it was just the pornography for jerking tears, and that Onward looked like that, just cranked to 11 just from the trailer, because it's like, oh, okay, like two kind of misfit children with a dead dad, and they're trying to bring him back to life. Oh dear.
Yeah. I mean, they're also really good at like the whole like character wants versus character needs stuff too, like from a screen. That's why I say they're good storytellers, because like the way they tell this, because like on every single trailer that comes out for a Pixar movie makes them look horrible. Like, why would I watch this? Like the trailer for Soul, it's like,
true.
He died, now he wants to get back to the world of the living, but they find a way to somehow make it very like, oh hey, you know what,
He
this
died,
was
and
actually
he wants
really
to get back
good.
to the world of the living. It's like, wait, this is just Coco, but with a black guy.
Again.
You ever
We already did
notice
this.
that? You never noticed that like every one of their movies about non-white people involves the non-white lead dying, and then most of the movie they're like a spirit or a talking skeleton or something.
Well, in this, you probably didn't see this, but an article popped up, a review for Soul, and they were like, oh yeah, you know, Soul's great. The storytelling's really good. The CG's really good. The animation, fantastic. But then they take the black man, remove his voice, and put the white woman's voice in the black man. And I was like, oh my God, is that what it's come to? Because there's a moment where they switch, where Jamie Foxx's character and Tina Fey's character, Jamie Foxx goes into a cat and Tina Fey goes into Jamie Foxx's body, and so this person was like, replace the inner voice of the white man or of the black man with a white woman. And I was like, oh Jesus Christ. But
All
to
I'm
your
saying
point
is
about
if they
Coco and all
continue
that
the pattern
stuff, yeah.
established by Coco and Soul, they're gonna make a
Princess and the
movie
Frog too,
featuring like
kinda.
Asian or Asian American characters, where the lead will die. They'll go to the spirit world or the land of the dead or whatever, and then try to find a way back to life, because that is the plot of apparently every Pixar movie.
every minority focused Pixar movie. Let me tell you one last thing that I watched. I just want to quickly tap on it because I just finished it. Because we were talking about prestige television with Bly Manor, and I watched Queen's Gambit because my fiance wanted to watch it. My dad got interested in chess because of it, and I think all of that is good because like chess is really interesting. But Queen's Gambit was, can we create a new rating that's just like prestige television? Because it was prestige television. But I like,
it's fine.
yeah, I like, no, I mean, I think it's probably like a high fine, low witness, depending on your mileage. It's a miniseries based off of a book. Every episode was written and directed by one person. So I like when they do that because they did that with Shogun back in the day. And that's the right way to handle miniseries, I think, is you have one large creative force. And they do the Star Wars thing in it where they don't tell you how chess works. They don't tell you what any of the moves are. They just assume you know, which I find whenever I watch a movie, kind of like you were talking about the Iranian film you watched. I love it when they don't treat the audience like they're newbies coming to it. Like, oh, well, we assume you know, and if you don't know, you can always go online and look it up. So I give it props for that. And also because the last episode, like the whole series is pretty depressing because it deals with, like a genius chess player who is also an alcoholic and addicted to pills and is an orphan and and she's sabotaging herself. And why is she sabotaging herself? And the last episode does a good job of like bringing it home with catharsis. But I think there's some good things to be had with prestige television, but the more prestige television sticks to miniseries, the happier I'll be because it kind of keeps it all focused and then we don't have to dwell on it. Like right now, we can just move on. All right. Wonder Woman 84 or Wonder Woman 1984 or WW84, Gabe. Let's get this out of the way first. What rating do you give it?
I'd say it's a witness.
Wow. Holy cow. You've just no joke. You've blown my mind. Oh my God.
Because like Austin put out article on the site basically saying like Wonder Woman 84 is the worst movie that's part of this DC cinematic universe. And, I've avoided like replying to any comments about that because it's like my views do not reflect the view of this article. So
mine do not either.
Kind of dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's actually kind of good.
Wow. Oh my God. I'm sorry. So here's why I wanted to know your rating right off the bat, because I wanted to know if we were able to have a nuanced argument or if I would have to defend the movie to you completely. I think you're probably higher on it than I am, which is strange. I'm gonna give it. I give it a high fine, low witness. It's come down in the coming weeks just because the more I've thought about it, there's issues that pop up. But
Oh yeah,
let's get into.
it's definitely
Let's
one of
get into
those
this.
where
Oh,
you think the
man.
more you think about it, the worse it gets.
No, don't say that. Don't Last Jedi this one. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is gonna be good because I've got questions for you about the movie, and I don't
Okay.
know if you have questions, but and we can get into a plot synopsis, but any plot synopsis would include spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, you have our sort of like jump takes on it. What like is it just like a straight witness? Is it a low witness, high witness? Like what kind of territory are we putting it in?
It's like probably a straight witness. It's like a solid
7.5.
7 out of 10. You know, it's one
So,
of those. It's like it's good. It's a good movie.
do you like it
Um,
better than the first Wonder Woman or worse? What do you think's
Better.
better? Really?
Yeah. So okay, I'm not a huge fan of the first Wonder Woman, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the second Wonder Woman is the same thing as the first Wonder Woman, but just done better. And here's what I mean.
Yeah.
First Wonder Woman.
I'm so excited. This is fun.
First Wonder Woman is really good as long as nothing interesting is happening. As soon as interesting things start happening, it sucks. So it's like, you know, in the first Wonder Woman, they're in that French village and it's snowing and like people are dancing and Steve Trevor is talking to Wonder Woman and he's like, this is life in the real world. Like this is, you know, you enjoy the little things and hold on to the precious moments while you have them. And it's not as grand or pristine as Themyscira, but it's good and wholesome in its own way. And I'm like, wow, this is great. This is a great scene. And then 5 minutes later, you know, I'm watching like a frail supermodel punch tanks, and I'm like, this is fucking terrible. And that's Wonder Woman. That's the Wonder Woman franchise in a microcosm. Like anytime there's a quiet scene where nothing's going on, it's like, wow, this is really good. And then it goes to like, oh, Wonder Woman is swinging on air somehow, like Spider-Man. And I'm like, this is
Oh, you're talking about in
terrible.
this movie when she flies?
No, there's a scene. Well, we'll get to the scene I'm referring to, but
Okay.
so yeah, it's like that's the first Wonder Woman in a microcosm. It's like anytime, you know, Wonder Woman's a fish out of water in England. It's like, oh, this is
That's fun.
charming and entertaining. And then she's like, I have to punch tanks with my skinny chicken arms. And then it's like, ah, this is awful. And then it's like, oh, her and Steve Trevor are having a moment. This is really good. And then it's like, Danny Houston's awful accent. This is terrible.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, Steve Trevor, you know, sacrificed himself to save the day, and it's very sad. This is a great scene. And then it's like, oh boy, David Thewlis is here, even better. And then it's, oh no, CGI David Thewlis. I hate it now.
I have an interesting comment about that. Yeah, go on.
And then they have like a Dragon Ball Z fight that is
Yes.
almost dumb enough to be entertaining, but not quite. So yeah, Wonder Woman 1984. I had heard a lot of bad hot takes on it, like, oh, this movie sucks, it's terrible, it's corny, it's garbage. And I'm like, okay, well, hopefully it's not too painful. So I boot up the movie, and first scene, we're having child Diana compete in something with her fellow Amazons on Amazon Island, and you know, they all have like nebulously defined abilities, and they're doing this nebulously defined contest for nebulously defined reasons, and it's all just awful. It's so bad. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is absolute shit. I really hope the rest of the movie isn't like this. So then it ends, and it goes to 1984. And you have this long opening of Pedro Pascal as manipulative billionaire genius guy Maxwell Lord doing a TV commercial, intercut with Wonder Woman stopping a robbery in a mall. And it's also horrible. Like there's a guy whose mouth is so big he looks like a CGI head. He's one of the robbers. And there's a lot of like really silly like winking. Like there's that whole thing where it's like she saves the girl and then winks at her, and the girl winks back, and it's like, kill me. It's so bad that like the dual opening is not a great idea. I mean, it's an okay idea, but both openings are horrible, and they do a horrible job of setting up the movie, because after they both ended, I'm miserable. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh no, what have I gotten myself into? You know, is it going to be just 2.5 hours of suffering like this? And then the rest of the movie happens, and it's actually, there's some really good stuff in there.
So basically, because one of my snap judgments after I watched it was like, I was disappointed by the movie, but because I really like the first Wonder Woman movie, like really like it. But one of the issues that I keep coming back to every time I want to rewatch it is that the movie is 2.5 hours long. So basically you're saying if you just cut both openings, then the movie's fine, because you don't have to, because that cuts off a half hour of the movie. Because I will agree with you, the beginning opening triathlon scene, I get why they did it. You want to start your movie with action to get the audience invested, because when the movie proper starts going, you don't have another action scene in the typical sense that engages the audience on like a popcorn sort of like guy eating the sandwich and having an orgasm at the same time level until
well, it also
until like 2/3
establishes
of the movie.
kind of the central theme of the movie of like, you know, the truth will set you free and all that stuff.
Right.
Right. And like,
Which
you
I
can't
liked.
cheat
I like
your
that
way
they
to what you
explicitly
want.
said it.
However, there's more elegant ways to set up your central theme than with a 10-minute like hot garbage action scene.
I don't hate the opening scene as much as apparently everyone else in the world does. Just because I like the stuff on Themyscira. Yes, it seems like it's pandering to the audience, and we can get into how this movie, the sequel, panders more to the audience than the first movie did. And my God, does it. But I like seeing Themyscira again. I like that they have the lesson in there. I get why they wanted to have a big action scene, even if it is too long. And I like the opening scene of like back in the day with comic books, and especially comic book movies like the first Batman movie, where it's like, you know, oh my gosh, someone's saving everyone's lives. It's some vigilante that's helping everyone out. Like, I was fine with it. I didn't have a problem with that. I know a lot of people did. You and Austin both have a problem with that. Austin doesn't even think that the opening connects to the movie at all. And it does. It's just, it's too long for how it connects to the rest of the movie. Anyway, continue. Unless you want me to go on something here.
You can go on, because I don't know how
Where
much
we're
more
gonna
I can
go.
say without spoiling stuff.
I think we should just start spoiling stuff. I mean,
Okay.
So I will say that I was disappointed. I think that the beginning of the movie is kind of like a microcosm for the rest of the movie. It reminds me of when you were talking about Heaven's Gate and you said the movie is too long for it to be pretty good. And I feel like that's how I feel about Wonder Woman 1984. Because every time I want to go back to it, there are certain moments, like the moment in the desert, like the big action scene there that everyone's like, oh, this is a great action scene. That's one of those moments
Who
that
said
I'm like,
that's a great action scene?
people, I think they're like, oh, that's the big action scene. I will say that I don't think any of the action scenes are particularly amazing. And I will say that I agree with you. The character stuff wins out. For me, the movie had more high points than it had low points, which is why I recommend people watch it. But unlike the first movie, where every single scene with a villain, just get rid of it and the movie's way better. In this movie, the villains were interesting, but the set piece moments felt a little bit more disconnected than in the first movie. So I guess that's my quick review of it. But let's get into spoilers.
Okay.
I mean, I don't even know where should we just start with, because to me, like, all the performances were I enjoyed all the performances. Let's put it that way, because you have Gal Gadot, who's, you know,
All the performances worked.
Yes. Yeah. You have Gal Gadot, who is just embraced this whole, I am Wonder Woman in real life and in fiction. So it's like, okay, that's fine. Chris Pine acts his ass off. Like every amazing moment to me comes from Chris Pine acting his ass off. Kristen Wiig, I thought, handled what she had to do very well. I don't necessarily love her nerdy her nerdy, like, skittish character that she has in like a lot of movies. But the fact that she was able to kind of transfer that into like, oh, I'm a confident person now, and now I'm just a complete egomaniac, like, psychopath. I thought that she handled
Yeah.
that really well.
She plays the character as it's written well.
As it's written. And we should get into the writers of this movie. But and then Pedro Pascal is just hamming it up completely, and there are certain actors who, if you can ham it up effectively, like Al Pacino hams it up, it's like, cool, I don't need anything else. Ham away. So I appreciated that.
No, yeah, Pedro Pascal's like just completely over the top performance is beautiful.
It is.
It's beautiful in all its ridiculousness. Contrasted with, say, Danny Houston in the first movie, where it's ridiculous and
Boring.
cringe.
Yeah, at least I liked watching the villains in this one. I can't say that about the first movie.
Okay, so
I was gonna say, do you
should we
need
try
to...
and summarize what this movie's about?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Wonder Woman works at the Smithsonian with Kristen Wiig, who is a nerd geologist lady. And they find a rock that's from the jewelry robbery earlier in the movie. And the rock will grant you one wish and take something from you in exchange. So Diana / Wonder Woman wishes for Steve Trevor to come back, which he kind of does. He possesses another person, which is strange. It's strange that he did that and didn't just like come back as himself.
Did you like that, or did you just find it strange?
I just thought it was weird.
I liked it.
And Kristen Wiig wishes she could be more like Diana, not knowing that Diana is Wonder Woman. She just wants to be like, oh, I wish I could be pretty and confident or whatever. And then she becomes like a super powered person. Oh, and then in exchange for their wishes, Wonder Woman starts to lose her superpowers, and Kristen Wiig starts to lose her humanity and slowly turns into Cheetah. Then Maxwell Lord has been angling to get this rock the whole time, so he eventually does and wishes that he could become this wishing stone. And then what his evil plan is, he wants to has a hole in his heart that he wants to fill with stuff. So he does that by granting everyone's wish that he can and then taking what he wants from them in exchange. Because like the stone takes something from you when you make a wish. Max becomes the stone so then he can choose what he wants, with the view that if he grants everyone's wish, anything he could ever want is owned by someone, so he could take that thing. And then the movie is sort of this long romp across the world where, Maxwell Lord is trying to acquire as many oil fields as he can for his oil company. And then because merging with the stone is like adversely affecting his health, he wants to acquire like all kinds of power. He wants to acquire the ability to grant everyone around the world's wish at the same time. And in doing so, the world starts to spiral out of control because everyone is getting exactly what they wish for, which is often frivolous, stupid, destructive, petty, greedy, nearsighted, and so on and so on and so on, which plays into the theme of the movie that was very poorly established in the opening scene. Then, let's see. Wonder Woman realizes that her own short-sightedness has started all this trouble. She's losing her powers because she won't let go of Steve Trevor. Steve Trevor's like, look, you gotta just, I'm already gone. I've been dead for a long time. You have to let me go and then go save the world, because the world is more important than I am. So she renounces her wish. Steve Trevor disappears, or that guy regains possession of his own body after being repeatedly molested when he was in Steve Trevor form.
I don't want to have sex with Diana, damn it.
And then Wonder Woman goes on to save the day. She uses the lasso of truth to reveal to Max, who has at this point become like a god, essentially, to reveal to him the error of his ways. And he witnesses the damage that his own sort of petty selfishness has created. And he renounces his wish, and then as he does it, it's being broadcast to everyone around the world, and they start to realize that all the chaos and destruction, basically they bring on the apocalypse, has been caused by their own sort of petty selfishness, and they renounce all their wishes, and things return to normal. Max reconciles with his Filipino son, and Wonder Woman goes on to have more adventures in the future. The end.
Yep.
Oh, and Linda Carter shows up and winks really fucking hard at the camera and is like, "Hi, I'm Linda Carter. Remember Linda Carter?"
Remember when I was relevant 20 years, 30, 40 years ago? 40 years ago? Anyway.
Who cares?
Yeah. Let me first say that when you were describing the part with like Steve Trevor and Diana and she has to renounce her wish and all that stuff, like I know Austin hated that scene. I actually really liked that scene and how it led to her. It led to her, what everyone was like, she's flying, and I'm like, she's not flying. She's falling with style. Like, 'cause she's like grabbing the lightning with her lasso, and she's like Spider-Manning it, and like she's not flying.
Well, okay.
She's falling with style.
I need to be more specific. I like the scene.
I like the actual scene.
I like the actual
talking.
scene where she's talking to Steve Trevor, and he's like, "You have to let me go. You have to let me go." And she's like, "I don't want to. I don't want to." And he's like, "You got to do it. Like it's not right to keep me here like this." Like I like that. I don't like the part where she's running in slow motion and then like jumps into the air weirdly. So there's a weird thing this movie does where there's a lot of shots of Wonder Woman from kind of her elbows or maybe her shoulders up. And they're often in slow motion, and they're often with like really crazy shit going on in the background. Either like Armageddon is happening, she's running in super speed, she's flying, and it looks really bad because it all looks like just shitty rear projection, like I'm watching Goldfinger all over again. It's like, oh boy, here's a shoulders up shot of Wonder Woman with clouds rear projected behind her. Here's a shoulder up shot of Wonder Woman supposedly running at super speed, but that's just slow motion trucks rear projected behind her. Here's Wonder Woman from the shoulders up crying in slow motion while the apocalypse is happening behind her. And it's like, this, why?
So
like why? Like Patty Jenkins is a competent director. She knows how a camera works. She knows how editing works. She knows the psychological effect that specific images have on the human mind, and carefully selects them so that it suits the story she's trying to tell. And knowing all these things, why? Why did she put so many of these awful shots that may or may not be rear projection? They're just so bad that they look like a rear projection into the movie.
Well, one of the things that, like, going back to the opening scene, because they have that one moment in the mall where she's like doing the run thing at the end of the first movie where she's like running and punching everything, and everything's like super fast behind her, and it looks kind of like a bad imitation of Twilight. You know how everyone was making fun of like the Twilight run for a while. But like I thought that was because she's basically at the point where she's like air ice skating with her like really wonky shoes. And so like I was down for that because I was like, oh, that's clever, because I've played Bayonetta, and one of the weapons in Bayonetta is a pair of ice skates that you cut people up with. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. That's an interesting way of doing it. Now, if it was actually supposed to be her like, she's running so fast and taking such large steps, then I'm like, yeah, she failed. But the idea of it like, oh, she's just skating on it because she's that badass that she basically is rollerblading like people did in the 80s, but, you know, on air or whatever. I was like, okay, I'm down for that. Yeah, I liked, there's a lot of things I liked in concept, and I like the idea of her like jumping up into the air and falling with style, the way that they did that. I like that in concept because I like that it's tied to an emotional revelation that kind of unlocks a new superpower for her. Very cliche, very video gamey, very comic booky. Well, but I still like that.
It makes sense, like
yes.
Narratively. But it's just the execution of that particular moment was pretty bad.
I felt like that's a lot of this movie is like the concepts and the ideas were really good, especially as it gets towards the end of the movie. Concepts and ideas really good. Execution leaves something to be desired. And that's one of them. The other one is like the Wonder Woman armor, the Linda Carter armor. It's like, oh, that looks so cool, and she comes down and she's gonna fight a bunch of people with it, and she's gonna use the wings like blades, like in Legion, and she's gonna do some badass stuff with it. No, she just basically uses it as a shield until it breaks, takes off the wings, then punches someone before electrocuting her.
Well,
So again,
she's
cool
Wonder Woman.
concept.
She's not gonna stab people with wing blades or whatever.
She had a sword in the first movie.
In X-Men, Archangel is the bad guy. When he has metal knife wings, he's a villain. When he has normal wings, he's a good guy.
But she had a sword in the first movie, and they found a way to make it like it was like a children's movie. Everyone has swords, nobody dies. Like, okay,
Well,
so
in
that
the
was
first
kinda,
movie, she's like, "I am here to kill Danny Houston."
yeah.
Like, make no mistake, I'm gonna straight up murder that motherfucker.
Yeah. Which is like, but like in the scene where they're in no man's land and everything, like they make a deliberate point to have her like flip the sword so she's holding the blade handle as she's like hitting people with the hilt of the sword. Yeah, the execution of the movie, like across the board, concepts were there, execution was kind of poor. Like one of the things about everyone doing the wishes, the first wish that happens, the guy puts his hand on there and he's like, I wish I had a cup of coffee. And then like the coffee appears and he's like, hey, cool, it worked. But it only appeared because like someone was sick. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's like the wishes come true, but it's all very coincidental. Yeah, they scrapped that about halfway through the movie when giant walls are emerging from the earth and like people are, crazy shit is happening. So I wish that they had stuck to one lane. I like the idea of like coincidental wishes happening.
You wish they stuck to one lane?
Oh my god, dude, it's happening already. All of a sudden, like the movie is just like one like straight path. It's just Wonder Woman doing the weird run. It's like, how did that happen? I swear I watched this movie and it was different. Now it's just Diana running in one lane. But I don't know. I like the idea of it being coincidental. And that's why I like the whole idea of like she wanted Steve Trevor to come back, and he does come back, but there's a hitch. And I think that's keeping in line with the concept of most witches. It's like, oh, there's a hitch. I don't think they needed to go so far as like, oh, you're losing all of your powers, because I hate movies where it like intentionally handicaps the hero. I find that like really annoying just because I want to see. I'm watching it. No, because, well, but it worked in Spider-Man too, because it wasn't like he was doing a bunch of action scenes where his powers were going away. Like they would kind of hiccup, but like in this, she's like physically getting weaker. Or like in the end of the first Iron Man movie when he has to use like the shitty arc reactor to defeat the guy and he's only at 60% of efficiency. I was like, that's dumb. I want to see like 100%. Two dudes going at it, a guy and a girl going at it. I don't care. Your hero, your villain, 100% going at it, badass fight through most of the movie or all of the movie. I don't like the idea of like intentionally depowering the hero. I always find that kind of lame.
Yeah, it worked for me here.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because like, the thing is that the movie, as inconsistent as its execution is, the themes really work. And they are, even in parts of it that are bad, the themes come through well. And it's, it's always about like, you can't sort of cheat or shortcut your way to what you want. The long path and the most difficult path is usually the right path. And so like it makes sense that basically Diana wants the impossible and she has to give up something pretty incredible in order to get it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And it's also, I think, well, you could also look at it as like she's spent, good Lord, how much time pining for Steve Trevor? I mean, if we say the first movie took place in 1914, it's been 70 years. She's been basically like an antisocial loner who lives in a society that whole time. And so she's like tied so much of her identity to this guy. And in order to bring him back, she has to sacrifice the thing that makes her special, or that makes her who she is.
Yeah.
Symbolism.
You say, hold on one second.
No, I said I whispered symbolism. into the microphone.
Well, that was one of the things a couple of things script wise I was worried about was it's so explicit with what, and this is why I'm kind of surprised. It's so explicit with what the theme is at the beginning of the movie that I was like, oh, there's the first groan from Gabe. The second groan being the fact that the script was co-written by Jeff Johns. Which I think you can
always induce from me, but this is this is certainly one of his less offensive works.
Yeah, and I mean, you can tell it's very comic booky in kind of like a bad way, but maybe also even in a good way. But just like as I was watching it, I was like, this feels like, I don't know, there was something about like the way that the themes were integrated, because until you clarified what Maxwell Lord's like his motive was, to me, I kind of got it. It's like, I want to make everyone's wish come true. And I guess it's like, I want to make everyone's wish come true so that I can take from them what they need. And like, okay, I'm like, that makes sense. And it plays into greater themes of, you know, culture in the 1980s, which I want to talk about as well. But like overall, especially with like, again, I'm going to go back to that wall just popping out of nowhere and sort of like the inconsistency of that, and some of the like the corny stuff with like when Pedro Pascal and Kristen Wiig are in the helicopter, and it's like, what do you want? And she's like, I'm done trying to be someone else. I want to be an apex predator, which I totally called. I think it was in the trailer, but as she's like, I want to be, I just leaned over to my fiance and I was like, an apex predator. She's like, an apex predator. And I was like, some of that stuff felt, yeah, some of that kind of felt comic booky. And then I think the other couple points that I thought you'd grown at was the invisible jet, which
about it.
Where I was kind of like hyped, but in that sort of way of like oh, that's awesome. I thought it was done in a way that was really funny, and it was effective in the context of the movie, which was important.
Goes, that was pretally tasteful.
I thought so too. Yeah. Like Linda Carter showing up at the end, which I thought was, I didn't hate it. I thought that was fitting. That was a nice homage, because it was a nice homage to, like, she was Wonder Woman, and it was like, okay, we're paying homage to her.
Oh,
yes,
so
it was a little bit
Superman movie. We gotta have a guy in a wheelchair.
No, dude, he's dead. No, he's dead.
No,
we have Brandon Routh come in.
Have to be him,
we have Brandon Routh come in a wheelchair, and he says, "My name's Christopher," and then, you know, that's what we'll do with J.J. Abrams, of course. So there's another guy who's pushing him around named George, who wears a brown suit, and that's there you go. That way we have George Reeve and Christopher Reeves. Wait, I flipped them. But yeah, talking about bad fan service. But I think so. The reason you liked it was because on a thematic level, everything. This was one of those cases where they shot really far and they missed their mark, but they did it in a pretty good way. Is that
I'd
good?
say so. I think the movie has a lot more depth to it than a lot of superhero movies, especially DC superhero movies, which is funny because, like, Batman vs. Superman tries so hard to be #deep and profound and stuff, and it's not at all. It's just so stupid. And I just remember seeing, like, a clip of, like, I think it was like Comic-Con or something. It's like Ben Affleck is like, yeah, man, the script is so good. Like, it's written by, like, these guys are geniuses. And then David Gore's like, it's about power. And anytime a writer says that whatever they're writing is about power, it's guaranteed to be bad. Because that doesn't mean anything. If I say my book or my script is about power, I basically said, I told you nothing at all. And it means I can't articulate what it's about because I don't know what it's about because I failed. Case in point, Game of Thrones, the last season. Those two knuckleheads were asked repeatedly, like, what the hell were you trying to do? And they're like, well, this show is about power, and yeah, it's like about power, you know? Anyway, yes, Wonder Woman 1984 aims very high, has very lofty ideas. It wants to be very, very profound, and in some ways it is. It's just, you know, it's got kind of sloppy execution.
What did you? I know I'm jumping around a lot. So if there's something specific you want to talk about, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep jumping.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, it's just a better version of the first movie. So it kind of vacillates between, like, the movie will say, like, you may think it's nice to get what you wish for, but oftentimes people's wishes and desires are actually much more petty and much darker than we'd really like to admit to ourselves. And I'm thinking, like, oh, that's pretty profound, actually. I'm kind of surprised it's coming from this movie. And then Wonder Woman has to save children from playing soccer in the middle of a street full of tanks. And it's like, why? And then she's
Back
also
to being
swinging
dumb.
like Spider-Man on nothing. She swings to rescue them with her. Oh no, wait, she swings on a missile, doesn't she?
Yes. Yeah.
That's right. She swings on a missile.
Dude, I was laughing
why that
so
looked
hard.
Like, yeah, she swings on a missile to save kids. And it's, first of all, like, going into that scene, I was like, oh, cool, we're going to have like an Indiana Jones or Mad Max Fury Road style car scene where a hero has to, like, climb vehicles to get to the vehicle in the front, and it's going to be fun. And it wasn't fun. It was bad. And there's a shot of her from the shoulders up running while trucks are rear projected in slow motion behind her. And I'm like, that was very hard to look at. And then there's random children playing soccer in the middle of the street. And I'm like, oh boy, just as if we didn't need any more cliches, here's another one. And she swings on a missile to save them.
Hey man, heroes save people, villains kill
And then
people.
Heroes save people, but, like, why are children playing soccer in the middle of a street full of tanks for reasons other than, plot convenience? Name one non-plot convenience reason why they would do that. See? And so yeah, I'm like, wow, that was awful. And then the movie that, switches to, like, we all wish we could change the world, but, you can't cheat your way to what you want in life. Sometimes, real change that matters requires hard work and discipline and sacrifice and things that are not fun, but in the end it's worth it because, all good things take great effort and you got to work hard for them. You can't just wish them to happen. There are no shortcuts in life. And it's like, damn, that hit pretty hard. And then Linda Carter's like, hi, I'm Linda Carter. Remember Linda Carter? So it's just like this, it's like this wild, the whole movie is this wild pendulum swing between, like, profound philosophical statements about life and then really horrible, like, blockbuster cliches.
I'm gonna jump to the ending because, like you've said multiple times, it's like I think they did a good job of integrating the overall message of the movie into the ending in a way that, so the original Wonder Woman, Patty Jenkins has come out and said, DC came in at the last minute and was like, no, you need to have a giant, brawling fight between Wonder Woman and Ares at the end. And she was very adamant in her script that it was going to be David Thewlis coming in. This is what I think was going to happen. Everyone always thinks of the God of War as, like, this super buff super armored, like, weapon wielding, giant presence. And her take was going to be that the God of War in today's day and age is just a politician who's just moving things of inconsequence around, putting the pieces in place.
In fairness to her, is quite clever.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant. I think at the time it would have been a little too ahead of its time, but I think her original ending was basically David Thewlis using Emperor Palpatine's powers while also saying, like, oh, Wonder Woman, like, these men, they're so hopeless because all they're going to do is fight amongst each other. I don't even do anything. I just put ideas in place and then they fight each other. Not sure why I went into the Mike Stoklasa voice there, but and I, like, in hindsight, that is such a radical but such an interesting ending, kind of like in this one where I think you get a sense of that she got to do what she wanted with the ending. And then you have this brawl with Ares that no one really likes. And she's also said, like, I ended up liking the ending that they chose, but it's really sad to think that the one slight against the movie was that the final battle against the main villain wasn't a cerebral battle, it was punching each other. And I think the ending of the first movie where she's like, I believe in love, and it's kind of corny and it's schmaltzy and it's Spielbergy, I think it works better if she's not she's like, I believe in love and beating the shit out of you. Like, that's not as good. You have the cerebral character against the buff character.
When she said, I believe in love, you know that song, I Believe in a Thing Called Love by The Darkness?
I believe. Is that the one?
Yeah. I was so disappointed that didn't just start playing when she said, I believe in love. Because their fight is so, like, you know, it's like a dumb Dragon Ball Z fight. And, like, I Believe in a Thing Called Love is the perfect music for a dumb Dragon Ball Z fight.
Just make a supercut. We just speed it up and slow it down to make sure that all the hits are on the beat. But so, like, I think even now, if you just take out that fight scene and imagine, like, David Thewlis in a suit as, like, I'm the new God of War, it's like, oh, that's so awesome. So I think her ending in this movie, I was going to ask you what you thought of it. I think I know what you think of it now that you've kind of gone over it multiple times. I like the ending a lot. I like the fact that after you get past the stuff with Cheetah, which kind of is like kind of more like fan servicey final fight than anything. And the fact that it's
pretty
just
bad. It was like, I felt like I was rewatching Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Dude, I don't even remember his last fight scene against Electro. That's the thing, is like the fight scene against her isn't set up particularly well. If they set up and like put the clear stakes in there for like, this is why we're fighting, and spent a little bit more time at that moment in the end of the movie, letting it breathe a little bit, where it's like, Diana, you know, you've always had everything. Now I have everything. And like give her a better motivation than like, you know, like shallow cat fighty stuff. Literally. I think that I think that fight scene would have had more impact. And you don't have to have a long fight scene. You just have to have a clear idea of, you know, what they're fighting for. And then when she gets electrocuted, I was like, she dead. But yeah, she's not.
Well, so the thing is like when she like, it reminded me of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 because it's really dark and they're kind of just flipping around wires and crap, like Spider-Man and Electro or Spider-Man and Green Goblin. And then she gets electrocuted, which also reminded me of Electro. And she has the same backstory as Electro in a weird way, where it's like, oh, we were friends, but now we're enemies because you think you're better than me, even though I'm really just insecure or whatever.
Well, her thing was Diana wants to take away her abilities because she wants to kill Pedro Pascal, and she doesn't want to give it up. So I think it's a little bit better than like you know, the normal like, oh, you're just jealous because I'm stronger now and faster and sexier. You know,
but it kind
like
of is
real. That's true. It does get to that at the end when she's like, I want to be an apex predator. So yeah, you're right. Never mind.
The way you set it up too, like the way you would rather have it, I was thinking like, isn't that just like the main bad guy's speech from Megamind? Yeah, like, he's like, I was a nobody, but now I'm super, and you just can't handle how super I am. You wish I was a nobody again. Or
Power
something.
reveals.
Power reveals. Megamind is such a good movie.
It is. It's like the character designs are kind of bad. But the movie itself, and like whoever animated Jonah Hill's character at the end of the movie, it was freaking top notch. But yeah, Megamind, I think about a little too often, just because it is really good. It is like for what they're trying to go for, they set it up and executed it really well.
But yeah, like so back to Wonder Woman. Like once you get past the cheetah fight, which isn't that good. I thought the rest of it, like the ending of the movie, was so good that it made me forget how bad a lot of the rest of it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. They nailed the ending completely.
Oh, they nailed it.
Which is what you have to do. Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's like, you know, she uses her lasso of truth, reveals to Pedro Pascal the error of his ways, and, like, all of a sudden, it becomes what I think Pixar movies try to be, which is, like, genuinely heartfelt. Because it's like, oh, why is Pedro Pascal such a psychotic fuck-up? And then it's like, oh, you know, he had this rough life. He he has these psychological injuries that have made him into this narcissistic character that he is, who is, just obsessed with satisfying his own ego at all costs. And then he's able to like see like, oh, this is how I became who I am. These are the mistakes that I've made. And it's like, damn, like I don't like how the hell did they fit the villain's backstory into like a 10-second montage and make it like
Emotionally
hit
heartfelt.
home,
Yeah.
How did they do all that and have it still be effective? But they did.
I'm surprised because usually you don't like the pop psychology stuff, but I guess this doesn't technically apply because it's just like reflecting back on your life. It's like a
it
Christmas
is just
Carol in
reflecting.
10 seconds.
They don't use any terminology or try to
don't.
diagnose anything. It's just like, this is what happened in the past. This is how he tried to deal with it, and this is who he is now. And it's super efficient. Like it's literally just like a 10-second montage, like bam, 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 and then it's over. But you get the full picture, and it works. And it's like, wow, that's shockingly good. And he renounces his wish, and then he has like his whole relationship with his son seemed like this bizarre throwaway thing for so much of the movie. And then like when he finally goes up to his son at the end and has that moment with him, I'm like, oh, this is so like poignant. Like it's genuinely touching. It's really, really good.
It is.
It kind of redeems how lackluster that whole dynamic is for the entire rest of the movie.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you could say it's almost purposeful because they have, I think, like 3 or 4 scenes together. The first scene is like, your son is here, and he's like, oh, I forgot my son. I got to go and attend to him. And then the second scene is like, God damn it, can't he just stay away? And you just see the son get up and leave, and it's like, that's. I was like, okay, all right, Pixar, trying to pluck at those heartstrings. And then at the end, I'm gonna give more credit to just Pedro Pascal acting his face off on that scene, just because he sold what is generally some pretty corny dialogue, but he imbued it with a lot of sincerity. He Chris Pined it. He Chris Pined it.
Like exactly, he Chris Pined it because I was saying Kristen Wiig does a good job playing her character as the character's written.
Yeah.
Pedro Pascal has some pretty like corny, on the nose, in your face dialogue that he has to get through.
Yeah.
And like he makes you believe it 100%.
Yes, he does.
Like the words that are coming out of his mouth are absurd, and like no one ever psychoanalyzes themselves like that spontaneously in the moment. But he does, and it's great because his performance sells it.
Yeah. I was just thinking, because you mentioned like what Pixar is trying to do. Since my major problem with the first Wonder Woman movie are the villains, they kind of tried to correct that problem by making the villains somewhat sympathetic. And I said, by the end of the movie, because Maxwell Lord, there's never really a point where I don't sympathize with him in some way. And I was like, they Pixar'd the villains. They made them like, they chose good actors. They made them somewhat sympathetic. And I was like, it's almost like they're cheating. But it works because, again, I actually like a lot of the scenes that have the villains in them. I think they're good. I'm going to ask you about the do you have something else you want to say, or can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
What do you think the significance was of putting this in 1984?
80s nostalgia, baby.
So I was thinking
80s?
about this. I was thinking about this because if they put it in specifically 1984, is like, oh, okay, it's an homage to the novel 1984. But if they were doing it for nostalgia, then they did it really badly. In the sense
I don't know how it would be an homage to the novel 1984.
I mean, except for in title alone, like 1984, maybe because 70 years after 1914. But like then all of the nostalgia, even on a surface level, is done kind of badly because it's like, oh, look isn't the fashion goofy? But then like halfway through the movie, everyone's wearing like suits, and the suits look modern because they're all, like the tight cut skinny suits, and the people who aren't wearing suits are wearing soldier outfits. And so you kind of forget about the whole like 80s sensibility. But they do tie it in. I think thematically they have it tied into like Armageddon is being created by all of these nuclear bombs. So it's like the escalation of chaos, like, because, the Mayans, they had the stone, and that, they caused their own apocalypse. So then you have like the political climate of, all of these nuclear bombs, but that doesn't come into play until the end of the movie. So I was like, okay, that's kind of weird that they kind of left that for the end. They didn't kind of pepper it in a little bit more. And then, so like I was racking my brain about this, and the only thing I can think of, which again, lofty ambitions, poor execution, is the fact that they wanted, like, the central theme of the movie of, truth is it's a harder path, but more satisfying for the truth versus the easy path but lie of the lie, is like 1980s, and I might be looking too far into this, but like 1980s in essence is just like excess, people wanting more and more and more and wishing for more and more things and refusing to accept what they already have, and what they have is already good. So you have the things like the deregulation. It's like, oh man, now everyone is living in excess, and now they want more and more stuff, and they want to bring in more and more things. And so like Pedro Pascal is like the embodiment of that ethos of like, I'm going to give you stuff, but everything I give you comes with a huge catch that you're not aware of, and I'm just going to take from you instead. That's the best I could come up with to tie it into the 80s, and maybe I'm looking into it too much. Otherwise, I'm very disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is something they thought of intentionally or something they stumbled into, or if it's all a big coincidence. I don't want to give them too much credit because I don't think that they thought this deeply about anything.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what I would say about the 1980s is that you ask most Americans right now what they think of the state of our country, and they would probably give you a pretty negative opinion. They would probably say things are not going so well. That would be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
And, liberal, conservative, progressive, libertarian, whatever your political leanings, they'll have different reasons for why things are bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes some of them may have the same reasons, even across the political spectrum. But I think a lot of Americans would agree things are not so good right now. And in a sense, we are still living in the 80s. The moral evils that were born of the 80s have produced the world that we live in today. And I've talked about this a little bit before on the podcast and in various rants to people who will listen, that one of the core ailments in American culture is what Wonder Woman 1984 points out very directly and precisely. And it's something that I think you could argue is born of the 80s or sort of became really prominent during the 1980s. And that's this like wishing yourself to success, shortcutting your way to wealth, fame, greed is good. Like our American culture, being as corporate as it is, encourages selfishness. It encourages narcissism. And why? Why would American culture want everyone to be a narcissist? One, narcissists focus inward. If you're focused on yourself constantly, you won't notice things going on around you. You won't notice that you're being controlled, manipulated, that politicians are taking advantage of you, that corporations are taking advantage of you, and so on. Secondly, narcissists are needy. Narcissists have fragile egos. And if you look at a lot of advertising, a lot of messages people are fed in the media, it's designed to bring your ego down. So when you have a fragile ego or a weak ego, you're constantly looking for ways to make yourself feel better. And the way that our society fills that is with stuff. It says, American culture looks at the American people and says, you suck. You suck, you're deficient. But here's how you can make yourself better. Buy this thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's advertising 101. That's how this all works. And it's a disease. It's created this sick culture that's produced the world we live in today. A lot of the ailments of the world we live in today are because just everyone has weak egos, they're petty, they're selfish, and they're constantly trying to satisfy this emptiness inside of them with temporary stuff, just like Maxwell Lord is. So I'm guessing that maybe that's what they were going for. I don't know.
I think that's kind of what I was thinking about too. You put it much more eloquently than I did. But yeah, that's because I was racking my brain like, what's the significance of the year? Because if it was just for the nostalgia factor, they did a horrible job. I will also say this: I think it ties into 1980. I have not read 1984, but isn't it about like Big Brother is watching? Or I mean, does it have to do with like mass media being?
Not really.
No.
1980 people will interpret 1984 to be whatever they want it to be.
Of course.
Because like a lot of great works of art, it has these sort of universal themes that can be sort of co-opted to suit particular ideologies. But I think the most basic high-level interpretation of what 1984 is about is it is about the danger of total institutional power.
Like one man controlling all of the wishes.
Or one man controlling all the wishes, or one institution controlling the world. It's basically saying like, if, our society is composed of institutions. These institutions have some level of power over our lives. Mm-hmm. If any one institution or any set of institutions is given total power, that's bad. And then, you can kind of drill down from there into more specifics, but that's the very basic, like, this is what 1984 is about. It's in total institutional power, not good.
That was your 3-minute book report on 1984. No, it's I'm glad you clarified that. And yeah, that's so like I would hope that, maybe I'm giving Patty Jenkins too much credit, but like I would hope that the whole idea of it being in the 80s is more than just superficiality, if that's even a word. So
I would hope it would be cool if, all the people who worked on this movie, like, did put together this incredibly deep and complicated metaphor for the problems with the world we live in. But I think the more likely thing is that they had an idea of the general themes and what they wanted it to be about, and then a lot of other stuff they just sort of stumbled into. Which, to be honest, is how most art tends to be.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you set out to write a book or something. You may have a very clear idea of what you want to say, but you're gonna, if you do your job well, you're gonna develop like all these layers and metaphors and symbols and things like that intertwine with the general point you want to make, or the general idea that you're thinking about or wanting to explore. And people will look at it and say like, wow, this is so deep and so complicated and blah, 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 blah. But what oftentimes happens is like, you just kind of had the core idea, and everything else you just sort of accidentally ran into and kept it because you looked over and it's like, wow, this actually works really well. This is a cool surprise. I'm glad that this, happened.
Yeah. Well, and I don't remember who said this, but one person said when you're writing a book or writing a screenplay, write your entire screenplay, book, whatever. Don't think about theme. And then when you go, because themes, like you said, themes will develop. And then your job is to see what those themes are and find a way to tie everything together. And, find out which themes you like, and you can explore them in more detail. Just have hints of them here and there. And I think that there's a good combination of both, because in order to make this movie, they would have already had to decide on the 1980s as when it was taking place in. But I like to think that maybe in the second or third draft, like Jeff Johns or Patty Jenkins was being nerdy, and they were like, ooh, we can tie this part too. Oh, it enhances the 80s-ness of it even more. Because like aside from those themes, like to me the music didn't sound very 80s. I wasn't a fan of the music in this movie. I don't really remember it that well. I was a big fan of the movie of the music in the first one. And like getting someone like Hans Zimmer, who's so known, especially in the early parts of his career, for like embracing synthesizers and things like that and digital instruments, I thought there would be more 80s references. I mean, we talked about how it was like, if she's riding the lightning, you want to hear the song about her riding the lightning. And it's like, as soon as that
You
happened,
want
I
to
was
hear
like,
"Ride the
oh,
Lightning" by Metallica, which is not actually about
exactly.
riding lightning, but about being executed.
Well, she's just, executed out of her mind that Steve Trevor is coming. That's just it. There weren't a lot of like, and maybe it was a good thing, but it didn't seem like they played or pandered to a lot of like 80s songs here and there. You didn't hear a lot of the kind of like trope 80s, we're going to put it in cliche songs. And that's
Also,
probably a good thing, but
just for
it took
reference, real
away.
quick,
Hmm.
"Ride the Lightning" by Metallica came out in 1984, so it would be period appropriate.
Because they were so worried about being period appropriate with the quote president of the United States unquote
I
in the
know.
movie. Doesn't look anything like Ronald
Bruh.
Reagan.
I mean, I think it was supposed to be, the DC movie universe president, not Ronald Reagan.
Whoever that is. Well, if it's connecting to Watchmen, it could very well be Ronald Reagan.
Richard Nixon is the president in Watchmen.
Oh my God, I'm getting all my references gone. Oh, Jesus Christ. Gabe, take over. Say something about Wonder Woman 1984.
Wonder Woman 1984 is a witness. It's very thematically strong, and does a lot of things surprisingly well enough to overcome a lot of sloppiness and a lot of genuinely bad ideas.
I'm going to give, you know what, Gabe, you've changed my mind. It's going to be a solidly low witness because my initial reaction to the movie was a witness. Disappointed because I feel like there was a lot of potential they could have mined from this movie based off of, the trailers and the marketing. But it was, at the end of the day, I think if people see it, they're not going to be disappointed and they'll get something good out of it. So
It's also too long.
Yeah, it is. That's the other thing. I was thinking about rewatching it for the podcast because I was like, okay, maybe I should have all the details fresh in my mind. But I was like, spending 2.5 hours watching this, which I was sort of like on the fence on, I would be better served watching something that I had never seen and just starting fresh from that. So, talking to you, it makes me want to rewatch Wonder Woman 1984.
Wait a while.
Well, I can't wait too long. It leaves January 30 or January 25th or something. So
It'll be back in a few years.
A few months. I don't know. Patty Jenkins just seems really interesting. Like, she seems like someone who's really good at like walking the straight and narrow line that you need to walk to be a studio director.
If you're picked by Disney to do a bland Star Wars spinoff, you are a professional studio director.
I mean, she was supposed to do the second Thor movie, and she was like, no, I'm going to do something where if I fail or succeed, it doesn't matter. And, it took her a couple more years to get that role, but, Wonder Woman came out, and, it pretty much launched her to director superstardom. So.
Yep. I'm just waiting for Lynn Ramsey to finally make it.
Maybe she'll jump on with one of those Blumhouse movies. We'll hire her.
Well, I guess she has a habit of starting on a movie. Studio wants a change. She says no, and then just leaves.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess
yeah.
I guess the difference between Patty Jenkins and Lynn Ramsey, if Lynn Ramsey was directing Wonder Woman 1, the studio would not have gotten their way on the ending.
Yeah. Well, and again, like the way that Jenkins handles herself on press tours and things, like she's like, yeah, I didn't want the ending that DC imposed, but after shooting it, I loved it. And like when she talks about Marvel, it's like, yeah, I turned away from Thor: The Dark World, but I love the other Marvel movies. It's like, okay, I see. It's not as obvious. When I put it that way, it sounds really obvious, but like in the moment, I think she negotiates really well because she's even like, oh yeah, Zack Snyder,
the political game you got to play in the business world.
Yeah, she's like, oh, well, how old is Lynn Ramsey? She's like, because
in her 40s, I think.
Okay, I was gonna say Patty Jenkins. She's had a kid and everything, so maybe she's like, the art of the negotiation is just like, you know what, I need to keep bread on the table, and I wouldn't mind if I had a nicer house and this way she gets more creative control over her projects. So, you play ball, you get rewarded, like Christopher Nolan. Speaking of someone who played ball, let's talk about Invisible Man, because it's Lee Wannell, right?
Lee
Director?
Wannell, something like
Lee
that.
Wannell. Co-writer of Saw and Insidious, and director of Insidious Part 3. I've read your review of Invisible Man, and your review is completely off base, bullshit, and asinine. I'm just kidding. I loved your review. I thought it was. I
I almost
I
did a
actually
spit take.
I know. It was like when Rise of Skywalker, when they kill off Chewbacca, and then they're like, "Just kidding, he's alive." It's like, gotta make sure to appease the fans and to appease Gabe. I gotta be like, okay, I'm just kidding. Austin recommended, even though it had already gotten a lot of good press and publicity. I think like Austin recommending it was one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm really intrigued about this movie. Yeah, it's just like it's I don't know, it's one of those movies that, like, we talked about how Wonder Woman had kind of poor execution in certain places. Like Invisible Man just had like very clear concept, very simple idea. You write in your review how they took a lot of the elements of it but switched it around in interesting ways. So instead of the Invisible Man going crazy, it's the person that the Invisible Man is stalking, she's going crazy. So you still have that element, but it's an interesting spin. And I think that's what I like about it, is because I think there are some things in it that are kind of cliche. Like the ending, to me, I was like, that's a little cliche. After the thing that happens in the ending happens, how it's resolved with like the last conversation of the entire movie, to me felt a little like, all right, I see what you're doing.
That's
there.
definitely not the worst ending they could have done.
The ending itself
Or the
is
most
actually
cliched ending they could have done.
right. It's really satisfying. The end, every decision, even the decisions that feel a little tropey or cliche-y, are incredibly satisfying. And there was that one moment that I thought was going to devolve into a cliche, but ended up Ryan Johnsoning me, and I was so caught off guard, and it set the tone for the rest of the movie going forward. It was just like it was so satisfying seeing a writer director with that much control over the project execute what they wanted to do so perfectly, while also paying homage to not only like, other horror movies, but also adding to the canon, adding to the overall like pantheon of like horror movies. Because like the fact that they were adamant about giving the suit a specific noise, like an iconic noise that if you hear that noise, you know that the suit is there. I was like, that's a nice touch. That's clearly him thinking about how to convey this in cinematic language and do it really well. And also add to the whole like, oh, I love monster movies of old because, you'd hear like a musical sting, or you'd hear this or that. So like having something iconic that you can reference to know that, oh, it is happening here. I think I'm probably just a little bit lower on it than everyone else, because I think it's a solid shiny and chrome. Definitely one of the best movies I've seen this year, but I need to sit on it a little bit more and process it, because it's not as, and not that it has to be, but it's like a better version of Us, whereas like Us was a very solid film. Invisible Man is significantly better than that, but it still kind of feels like solid film territory in certain aspects, and not necessarily like transcendent film territory, except for a couple of spots. So I need to sit on it a little more for like where it fits as far as movies in 2020. But yeah, I think your review kind of covers a lot of what I felt about it.
Nice. Yeah, I think The Invisible Man is one of the best movies of 2020. And I guess for a little background for listeners who don't know this, so historically speaking, Universal Studios has owned the rights to cinematic adaptations of a lot of like classic monsters. So, in the golden age of Hollywood, Universal was pumping out a lot of monster movies based especially on like Victorian era horror and fantasy and science fiction stories. So it'd be like Frankenstein, Dracula, The Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Mummy, and so on and so on and so on. And in the early 2010s, when this whole shared universe superhero boom really started taking off, Warner Brothers is like, well, we own the movie rights to DC Comics, so we'll do a DC superhero shared universe. And Universal, in all their infinite stupidity, went, we have all these like classic monsters from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. What if we did like a shared superhero universe of the Mummy and Frankenstein and Dracula and the Invisible Man and the Creature from the Black Lagoon and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and all this crap that's like, you realize League of Extraordinary Gentlemen did that and proved that it's a bad idea, but they tried to do it anyway, and they had that Mummy movie with Tom Cruise that is apparently one of the worst things ever made and was such a huge disaster. They're like, well, what if instead of doing a big, dumb, blockbuster shared universe, we rebooted these classic properties with a low budget? And so they got in Leigh Whannell, who's, he like Matt, like you said, he's a co-creator of Saw, mainly a screenplay writer, but has started to get more and more into directing. Like he wrote and directed a science fiction body horror movie called Upgrade a couple years ago, which I know Austin is a huge fan of. I think it's all right. Like it has some neat ideas, but it's not all there, and the ending is very cliched. However, Invisible Man is a home run. It's fantastic, and I think the story is pretty simple. And it does rely on some cliches, like the whole like, oh, she's being gaslit, she's going crazy sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But the execution is so pristine, like I think the first half is probably stronger than the second half of the movie, just because the first half is it's full of tension and build up and like, oh God, when is he going to come? When is he going to get her? The stuff that makes horror movies, that feeling of anticipation of that something horrible is going to happen. Yeah. And it's all done with very simple tools, like there's special effects that come into play later, and a lot of the invisible tricks are nothing revolutionary. Like a lot of horror movies have invisible enemies, whether they're ghosts or demons or whatever. So it utilizes a lot of the same ideas, but it just does it so well. Like the camera is very methodical and it's very slow, and the frame is full of a lot of negative space, a lot of empty space, looking at walls, objects, and empty areas, and it really just gives this incredible sense of dread. Like, is he there? Like, is the Invisible Man? Am I looking at him right now, but he's not there? And it slowly starts to worm its way into your mind, where like anytime they show you nothing, there's that feeling of like, oh no, is something there? And the audio track helps a lot with that as well, where there's a lot of like very subtle like breathing, footsteps, shifts of weight, creaking floorboards, all that crap. But it's all so quiet, and so it just sits like on the periphery of your awareness. And sometimes Elizabeth Moss, the main character, reacts, sometimes she doesn't react, but either way you get that sense. And I think because they mix it up, like sometimes she notices, sometimes she doesn't, it starts to also develop that sort of paranoid fear and helps you relate to her, because she's incredibly paranoid of like, did I hear that? Or was I just kind of imagining things? Like, was that a footstep or was it something else? So a lot of the nitty gritty technical elements of the movie are just so good, and they fit what the movie is trying to do so well.
The thing because you were mentioning the camera moves, I actually wanted to point this out, reacting to a couple of things you said. I love that the slow camera moves happen because generally speaking, when a camera move like that happens in a horror movie, you're expecting it to reveal something that is there. But this is the Invisible Man, so it goes to reveal it. And the first time you're like, is something creepy going to happen? Is it? I don't know. And then as you watch the movie, because he's using, good film language, you figure, okay, well, it has to be motivated by something. So about, maybe like after the second or third one, I was like, oh, the camera's moving because he's in the room with her and it's moving to reveal where he is. We never know exactly where he is, but it's like the camera's holding on him and then it pans back over to her and it's like, oh, and now he's fucking with her. So, things like that, things like you said, using very simple effects in order to convey where he might be, and just also not showing him. Like, I think it's funny because I would have loved to see this in theaters, but I think that there is a clear difference between the first half of the movie where you don't know he's there and it's kind of that slow burn build to when he finally is revealed, and the second half.
I wouldn't call it a slow burn because it's extremely tense.
That's true. I love all that stuff. But the group I was watching it with, after the thing happens in the middle of the movie that kind of changes the tone of it, the people I was watching it with were like, oh, that's when I started perking up and got really interested and invested in the movie. And I was like, maybe it's just because I'm a film geek. I was like, I liked it all. I love the way that the first half of the movie sets it up so that in the second half they don't have to do as much work.
Well, I've said this before, but I think most people don't like horror movies.
A
good horror movie is genuinely unpleasant, and people don't like unpleasantness.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that Invisible Man, the first half is a horror movie. It is just wall-to-wall fear and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
The second half is more of a thriller, where like the main character kind of has some more agency, and like it's more about like solving problems and dealing with a clear threat. So I can understand, like, coming from that perspective, that most people don't like horror movies. I can totally understand why people would like the second half more. I think for me, I do like horror movies quite a bit, and in my mind, I categorized this as a horror movie, and I think for those reasons, I like the first half, the more horror half, more than the thriller half.
Yeah. I mean, I generally like slow pacing because we talked about Possessor, and I like the fact that it kind of is intentionally kind of slow moving. And that's why I like the beginning of this, because like you said, it just lets the tension sit. And so if you're watching it, and especially if you're watching it in a theater where like everyone has to put their phones away and you're just staring at the screen and you're just waiting for something to happen, like you can start to feel the hair on your spine start to raise and you're like, okay, what's going to happen? And they have a couple of moments of like release where they have those jump scares where it's like, okay, that's a good release. I'm thinking specifically of when she's in the attic and she throws the paint on him the first time. And I like, my God, that like woke me up. I was like, oh my God, that was amazing. Cause like, it's just creepy enough and just unsettling enough. And then it goes back into the whole like, okay, where is he? Why is he the slow movement of it all.
Shortly after that, she has the fight scene with him. That's like,
oh yeah, mm-hmm.
It's amazing
because
it's like the scary version of Evil Dead 2, where Bruce Campbell is like smashing plates on his face when he's fighting his possessed hand, and then she's smashing plates on the Invisible Man, and it's like both scenes are amazing. Evil Dead 2 obviously is hilarious, and then this is quite frightening.
Well, to that scene as well, it actually reminded me of Tenet when John David Washington is, spoilers, fighting himself, and it's going like forward in time and back in time.
Yeah.
I think if I had seen Invisible Man before I had seen Tenet, I would have been like, dude, that scene in Invisible Man though, it's so much crazier because like it's just so the way that they imply that violence is happening, the way that they drag her back and forth. And I guess they used visual effects. I thought they would have just like attached a wire to her and like pulled her or did something more on a mechanical level and not as much relying on like painting him out and things like that. But it's just such a like, again, execution is important, and it was executed pretty flawlessly, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it was great. And, you made a good point about the slow, deliberate camera moves. I mean, I think the other thing, too, is like really good horror movies tend to be slower paced, at least in terms of their shot to shot editing, because you need room for fear and anxiety to build. If you cut too fast, it's just sort of like it doesn't register.
Yeah, it becomes an amusement park ride, like It Chapter 2.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. It's not a horror movie. It's not scary. But yeah, there's that at the very beginning, she's sneaking out of, billionaire optician Griffin's house. And there's one shot where she's changing her clothes, and as she's changing, the camera pans away from her to an empty hallway. Where, the end of the hallway is completely dark. You can't see what's there. And then the building is like, oh, is something going to come through the hallway? And then it just pans back to her with nothing happening. Yeah. And that, I think, it's a very clever little shot because it sets up every subsequent shot in the rest of the movie where it's showing you nothing. And you think, is there actually nothing there, or is there something?
Why is he doing this? It makes you ask questions, and I like it when the movie it makes me ask questions, like good questions, not like why am I watching this?
Yeah. Well, there's some screenwriter who is saying the primary way to engage an audience's interest is to make them ask a question or to ask a question to them. And the most common type of question you see in a movie is, what is going to happen next? It's also the least interesting question a lot of the time.
Right.
But yeah, the more questions you can get an audience to ask about something without there being too many, if it's like 2 or 3 interesting questions that can keep them through a scene or through the entire film, I think that's kind of like the ideal zone. Like, what's going to happen next? Why is the Invisible Man doing this? And, how is she going to get out of it? Or something. Go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
Oh, well, and then I was going to say with the second half of the movie, they introduce a new question, which I was kind of annoyed by because this is where the movie descends into cliche, is she crazy or not? Like, is this real or is she imagining it? Which is, I think, I'm very tired of that especially in horror movies. That whole like, is it just all in her head or is it real? Because I think the moment you question your main character's sanity, you throw your entire movie into question, whether intentional or not. So that can become a problem with the Invisible Man where, she's being gaslit by her abusive ex-boyfriend, who is the Invisible Man, slowly starts losing her mind. She is framed for a bunch of things she didn't do. And eventually the Invisible Man murders her sister in a restaurant and places the knife in her hand. And in a very frustrating sequence where she's just grabs the knife out of the air, it's like, no, you idiot, don't grab the murder weapon. She's blamed for the murder of her sister. And ends up in a mental hospital. So everyone in the movie is calling her reality into question, and she's acting crazy, and they put a lot of makeup on her to make her look, like a mental patient. And Elizabeth Moss has a very good performance. So she sells
her shoulders.
That's
kind of frumpy.
Yeah, I mean, she sells like the frantic, like, no one believes me, he's invisible, really well. And she also sells the like kind of that catatonic, like, I'm resigned to my horrible fate, really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the problem is that, okay, she's in the mental hospital. People think she's crazy. You're planting that seed in the audience's mind that, oh, well, maybe she is crazy. And then everything that happens after, all of the thriller type sequences that happen afterward are then called into question as well, which you don't want generally. Especially in a movie like this, where it's all played pretty straight, I don't think you want the audience to be questioning, like, oh, is this ending real or is it all her imagination?
I took a different approach to it. I thought that the movie actually did a good job of making it so that the camera that we're facing with on her, that she was never insane, that we're with her. They did a good job of putting us in her corner of like, she's not insane, she's not seeing things, weird shit is happening to her. We can tell because of the sound. Like the sound in the beginning kind of adds the paranoia, but maybe because I just wanted to believe, I never got a sense that like the movie was trying to have us as the audience question her reality, because everything she was saying in the world of the movie, especially after they reveal that second suit, everything that she was saying in the movie was seemed like she is still sane. Everyone else is looking at her strangely, and then I the makeup and everything like that, I give that to like she's in a terminal treatment center where they have to give her pills and stuff, and so she can't feel as alive because she's being intentionally drugged. So, and like the scene where she grabs the pen and she sees the Invisible Man sitting on the chair with the indents and everything. That was when I was like, okay, she's still cognizant. She still knows where everything is. But like if she went out to reach and touch the person, she can't do it because, he can see her, so he can move easily and things like that.
So you're correct, but I don't think everyone's going to pick up on that. Because, like, how many times in conversation have you been talking to someone and you said something that you thought was pretty clear and they completely misinterpreted it?
Yeah. Well, that's why I like the movie, because it does play off of that.
Well, but what I'm saying is, like, the movie is very clear about her point of view is real. Her reality is real. She's not crazy. All this is actually happening. But in spite of that, in spite of how clear the movie is on that, a lot of people may still buy into the, oh, she's crazy, this is all in her head scenario. Which is why, like, introducing the mental hospital as a plot element, I think, I'm not super in love with that choice, because it invites that interpretation. Even though the entire rest of the movie categorically denies that interpretation, it's still inviting that interpretation, because there are a lot of audience members, I guarantee you, who will watch Invisible Man and interpret it in that way, or think they're clever in interpreting it that way.
You get it's the whole Inception, Leo was dreaming the whole time thing.
It's the
she was crazy
fan
the whole
bullshit
time,
where I think people will latch onto one piece of evidence that supports their quote unquote mind-blowing fan theory about a movie, when everything else in the movie directly contradicts it. But maybe those other elements are so subtle, and the evidence they're using is a very major plot point, that they're not able to see the counter argument.
I can see that with the end of the movie. I think that Lee Wannell does a good job, or a good enough job, of planting enough seeds. But again, you have to be paying attention to the movie in order to catch all of them. And not even paying attention that hard, but like you have to, because at the end of the movie, so let's get into you were talking about the sisters, and we've been spoiling the movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, right now it's on HBO, or I would totally recommend just either renting a copy of it or buying it on Prime or whatever service you use and watching it, because it does such a good job of everything that it's trying to do, and it's totally worth taking 2 hours out of your life to watch it. The scene where her sister dies, that's the scene that I thought was going to devolve into kind of like you were saying, where she's like, I swear I'm not crazy. He's an invisible man. There's an invisible man. He's found technology and I can prove it to you. I just have to. And like, you would think that the sister would be like, okay. And then they would go back to the house and the suit is gone, or something crazy like that. Nope.
Yeah,
that's not what happens. That's not what happens at all. All of a sudden you just see a knife. It cuts. You see Elizabeth Moss, knife in the air, cuts back to the sister, throat slit. She dies. And I was like, it was one of those moments where I was like, the entire world and the entire movie has been flipped on its head, because she doesn't have the police officer friend, James, Now she doesn't have her sister, who was her last hope, because of the life that she lived with the crazy boyfriend, husband person. She doesn't have any other friends. So now she's completely alone. And then I always imagined it as the Invisible Man taking her hand up and shoving the knife into her hand, and then her in so much shock that she just couldn't put it down. Now, granted, to that point, she's made a series of really stupid decisions. So when it happened and she grabbed the knife, I didn't think it was that stupid, but I was also going like, oh, Jesus Christ, what's going to happen now?
That's true, because that scene is a great twist, and it is a great turning point for the movie, because it does set you up for like, she's like, see, I'm not crazy, and then they go to the house and the suit is gone, and her sister's like, you are crazy, you crazy person. But yeah, instead they just fucking kill the sister right there in a crowded restaurant, and you're like, holy fucking shit. It's like a bomb went off or something, you know?
Yeah. And not only that,
it's an
but
amazing
it's
scene.
like, and it feels really impactful, because like in a lot of movies, characters die and we don't care. She dies and it's like everything has just shut off. Like, I feel like we've gotten into a series of movies like with Possessor and things like that, where they are taking character deaths and making them feel very important. And this was one of those deaths that I was like, holy shit, everything's off the table. Also, her boyfriend / husband / whoever it was, complete psychopath, which makes the end of the, like, that moment near the end where the brother comes and is like, all right, he's done playing games with you. It's like, motherfucker, you killed her sister. You killed an important person and a person in general. And you just want to say, oh, I'm just messing with you. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you and that entire family? Yeah. So all of the throat slits to me were just incredibly impactful, and like, so all of the violence was so effective in a way that you don't necessarily get in other movies.
Well, I think it's also really effective because it's so sparse. There's there's 3 kills in the whole movie, and there's a lot of there's a couple near deaths, but yeah, it's just like, holy crap. And I mean, there are some instances of characters acting like kind of stupid or at least questionable, but that's kind of par for the course in a horror movie. And to be fair, people act stupid all the time in real life, so
yeah,
I can forgive it.
Well, and especially someone who's been isolated from isolated from everyone else for so long. It's like, maybe she isn't careful at trust. Like, it's clear that she's not careful to trust.
Well, I'm not just talking about the main character. I'm also talking about her cop friend, his daughter, when she gets slapped by the Invisible Man, and she looks at Elizabeth Moss and is like, "Why did you hit me?" It's like, lady, Elizabeth Moss was like 5 feet away. Her arms are not that long,
and she's sitting down.
And she's sitting. Like, how does she generate that much force? Like, she's, from her butt. She's not gonna hit you that hard, because the other thing, like, she's hit so hard she gets knocked over.
Yeah.
So it's like, how did Elizabeth Moss hit you that hard from 5 feet away sitting? Like, there's stuff like that where you're like, okay, this is kind of stupid, but like I said, it's a horror movie.
Point A to point B.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I like how the pepper spray comes back into play later on in the movie too. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. And like, of course, unlike some other movies where it's like the stupidity is not, character. That is weird, because like, she gets slapped and it's like, why would you slap me? It's like, why would she? That's a good question. Why would she slap you? Why would you believe that she hit you?
Yeah.
Is it just the vacuum of truth in the situation is so like, it's that, yeah, it took me out a little bit. The cop's reaction to it though, I was like, I see what you're doing to try and get her isolated alone in the house, but like, that was very well done. He's really good. The guy who plays as James, I thought, did a really good job in the movie. All the actors did, to me.
All the actors did a great job, yeah.
Even Bly Manor alumni. Also, again, playing a fucking fucked up boyfriend who...
His American accent is not good, though.
No.
What's his name? Was it like Oliver something?
I don't know. I was going to refer to him as this character from Bly Manor, but I can't remember what
like
the character's
Oliver
name
Jackson
was.
Cohen. But yeah, his American
like
accent
that.
has twinges of the ridiculous Scottish accent he puts on in Bly Manor. Mice J Soul. Like, it's just so over the top. And then his American accent is pretty wonky, but he doesn't talk very much, so it's okay.
Right. Yeah, and he's not in it that much either. For the most part, he just says surprise. It's like,
Surprise.
how hard is it for him to fake an American accent when saying surprise? Surprise. Like,
surprise.
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 It's like, why are you doing that with the sh? What are you talking about? That's how I always talk. Like, oh God.
What you mean? I'm
Adding
just
an
saying
SH.
surprise. It's in the script. I'm saying exactly the words that you wrote.
Can you imagine if, like, before, he departed, like, his last film is just playing this guy in Invisible Man. He's like, oh, I got you a shrimp, sushi, and steak. Like, would you like to
sure
eat?
what you wanted. So I got you sushi, shrimp, steak, and salad. I know you're watching your weight.
With some shallots. Like, oh God. Speaking of the ending, what did you think of the ending?
Thought it was
Not
good.
the final conversation, but like everything leading up to it, where she's like, I know you want a baby. Tell me the truth. All I want from you is the truth. Blah 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 blah. Like all of that stuff, and then leading up to him getting his throat slit in the invisible thing, and then her running in. Yeah, you thought it was good?
Yeah, I thought it was good. Like she's wearing a wire and she's trying to get him to confess to the crime, and yeah, he just won't. He will not give in, but he just gives that little surprise with a lot of emphasis on it, and she's like, okay, that's his confession. That's all I need. And then she comes back in the invisible suit, slices his throat, very nice, and then acts like, oh my God, what happened on the camera, and it's like, oh, this is good. I just turned the tables. This is fun. Yeah, I thought it was a good ending. I was just really worried it would cut back to the mental hospital or something, and she would be sitting there rocking back.
With the
I
Kubrick
was so
face.
paranoid that was like, oh God, I really hope the movie doesn't pull that bullshit out. So yeah,
I was worried. I was worried that they would bring back the title and it says Invisible Man, but then like the man part starts to move a little bit to the right, and it just brings a WO in there, and it's like, oh no, I wasn't worried about that at all. Yeah, I like, we haven't talked too much about the editing. We've talked a lot about the camera work, which is fantastic, but I like the fact that editing wise, until they have that final moment of like her hanging up the phone and then she gets that look on her face, they do just enough that it looks like someone else did it. Because like after he gets his throat cut, she immediately runs out and she's like, oh my God. And it's just like, the pace of the editing and all of that stuff just worked in your favor to make you think like, no, she didn't do it, did she? Did someone else come in and cut his throat? Like, what exactly happened? And then it's like, okay, we're definitively saying that she did. And then just in case you didn't know it was definitive, they have the cutaway to her purse that has the suit in it, and then that dialogue happens where like it's a little cliche-y where it's like I saw him cut his throat, didn't you? And you're kind of like, does the cop character is like, is he going to be under her control now because she can turn invisible and mess with him, or or what's going on with that? So like I like that was ambiguous of like, all that stuff. But yeah, I thought the editing and the pacing of that scene was just really, and even to the degree of like where Adrian never explicitly says it, but you somehow know, just like through inference, like, yeah, he was the mastermind behind this the whole time. He did come up with this a crazy way to make it look like he had kidnapped himself and things like that. Just really excellent filmmaking all around. It's like, it's a shame that I never got to see it in theaters, because it just, as great as it was watching it on a giant TV and in darkness and everything like that, just would have been so amazing to go into a theater and watch it.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe next year. Maybe it'll get enough. Maybe she'll get enough plaudits so that she can win an Academy Award.
Oh, please!
I don't think it's gonna happen.
This is a trend at this point. Every year there's a really good low budget horror movie that has an amazing performance by the leading lady that then gets ignored. It
Yeah.
happened to Toni Collette with Hereditary. It happened to Lupita Nyong'o with Us, and it's gonna happen to
Man.
Elizabeth Moss.
I still think about Us more than I should because I thought I was kind of lukewarm on it, but Us is like there's things about Us that are just like so good, like the split diopter shot at the end of the movie.
I've completely
The
forgotten that movie.
t-
Also, I hate split diopter shots. I don't know why you like them so
oh,
much. They're so gross.
I like them if there's a reason for them. And I don't know, I just think they're cool. Like, it's one of those visual tricks that as long as there's a purpose for it, it's because most of the time, it's really unsettling. But if you can find a use for it that's outside of the norm, it makes it even better. I don't know. They're also just visually, I think they're pretty sick looking. Both, visually sick as in like, ugh, and sick as in like, dude, bro, that's sick. So
I don't like them. They just look weird. I think you should either rack focus or do a deep focus shot.
well, that's one of the reasons a split diopter came to be is because if you have two people in a scene and you don't have enough light or restrictions of the lens, then you can't get both of them in focus at the same time. Like I'm gonna like in The Revenant, even when they're shooting on an 18 millimeter lens, they would like push really far into Leo for like a close up, but because he was so close, they would have to have the background slightly soft and out of focus. So the split diopter was originally invented to make it so that those deep focus shots, you could have something in sharp focus in the front and something sharp focus in the back, and you hope that the thing in the front takes up enough of the frame that you can't see the limited depth of field behind him. So that's, I think, why it started coming up, but then people started using it more for psychological effect, like the vertigo shot, because it's just offsetting and kind of it creates an unsettling look. Like I said, everything in film, like all of the tools, they're tools. It's how effectively you use it. You can use a screwdriver to nail in a hole, to puncture a nail, but that's not why it's useful. So it's finding good uses for the tools that's important.
Well, so my point of view is that if all camera techniques are tools, the split diopter shot is like a paperweight. It doesn't do anything.
I forgot who I was talking to.
There. Like it's available to you, but it doesn't do anything.
No, I mean, I think it does something. Like I said, but I was talking to someone about zooms, and someone was saying like, "Oh my god, I hate zoom lenses." Like,
zooms are the king of camera movements.
Well, good zooms are, because you can easily have a really bad zoom, and like for a while, everyone was doing these really over the top Steadicam shots, and like that was the thing to do. These really complicated, So again, when you see a person who uses any of the camera tools effectively, it's like, okay, it's almost like that's the reason why they have them. Like Barry Lyndon is the reason why zoom lenses are good. The Shining is the reason the Steadicam is good, for example. So,
have you seen Killing of a Sacred Deer yet?
I have not.
That movie has a lot of great zooms.
Does it?
Yes. That's
interesting, because The Favorite had a lot of moving shots, low angle, kind of roving shots throughout it. So, anytime one of that director's movies comes up, I'm always like a little, like, kind of have to be in the mood for it. Okay. I don't want to see Emma Stone cleaning Olivia Colman's feet for 5 minutes as bees get crossfaded into the picture.
Okay, here's a better analogy for the split diopter shot. In the world of filmic grammar, the split diopter is a semicolon.
See, you're talking to the wrong person. I love semicolons. But yes,
semicolons are stupid. You should just use a period because it's two separate sentences.
I prefer a semicolon over a comma and sometimes.
I've edited papers from people who love semicolons, and I've had like a stroke because I'll go in and replace every semicolon with a period, and they get mad at me. And I'm like, it's two separate sentences. Just put a period. Semicolons are useless. Goodbye.
I, and if anyone has read any of my articles, then they know that I'm a little too in love with writing for the sake of writing long sentences. So I am one of those people that you would probably look over my paper and be like, God damn it, Matt, take out all the semicolons, shorten your sentences, take out the adverbs, and it'll flow a lot better.
Well, I use a lot of long sentences too, but I try to make sure it's, you have one, you have one complete sentence, and then anything else is a subordinate clause that is not a sentence on its own.
I don't know. It's different strokes for different folks. I understand you don't like split diopters and semicolons. I get it, but sometimes you have a number list on a math test, and you've got it with thousands, and that comma's already being used, so you need the semicolon. That's why it's so prominent on a keyboard. That's kind of the weirder thing. Like, if they had swapped the colon and the semicolon on a keyboard, that would make more sense.
Yeah,
in the sense of
are
like
more useful.
Everyone uses colons. You have to use colons all the time. So, but I'll also say I'm kind of nerdy in that I try and find like grammar or punctuation that aren't commonly used and try and find a way to incorporate that more into my writing or whatever I'm doing. So like understanding like parentheses, double parentheses, triple parentheses, interrobangs, things like that. It's the nerdy side of me that enjoys like all of the weird grammar rules that I don't follow clearly. But yeah, see, like that's why you don't see split diopters on everything, because it's like it's weird and it takes a long time to set up. And a lot of people, if you even notice it, a lot of people don't like it. So I get it.
Yep.
There's no split diopter shots in Invisible Man, so there you go.
There aren't, which is part of why it looks so visually
why it's so good,
gorgeous.
Oh man, Invisible Man. It was
It's really good. It is a definite shiny and chrome for me.
Potentially movie of the year material, maybe. I don't know.
I don't think it quite eclipses like Possessor or something like that, but it's high up. I mean, 2020 has been a weak year for movies, which I think we'll get into later
soon.
Just because,
soonish.
Just because like a lot of the awards bait crap is going to be coming out in the next, 2 to 3 weeks. So we can talk about some more of that, but yeah, 2020 has been a weird year for movies. Not a whole lot of strong stuff. I think Invisible Man would be a top 10 movie any year or most years.
Oh yeah.
But it's definitely like top 5 this year. Maybe even top 3 at this point. I don't know.
You said top 5 or top 3?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that. Because, I mean, I don't know how you look at movies, but I think, like... Because I always think about Ford v Ferrari and my stance on James Mangold and everything, and I feel like I've been unfair to Jon Favreau in the Mandalorian episode, because generally speaking, I like his vibe. I feel like I'm also unfair to James Mangold because, like, he is super solid, and his movies tend to be super solid, and like I don't know what makes Invisible Man better. I think it's a combination of how tight the movie is, how well executed everything is, and there's just enough creativity that pushes it past Witness and into Shiny and Chrome. And I'm sure some of it is biased because, Austin loves it, you love it, and I'm like, you know what? I like it enough that I can push it forward a little bit farther. And like just talking about it now, in a couple, maybe later this year, I'd be like, yeah, I might as well watch it again. Like as I was watching it, I was like, I should probably pick this up on Blu-ray so I can like listen to the director's commentary, see the behind the scenes, because there's some stuff that is really awesome that I would love to see how they did it. And so, yeah, it's so good, man. So awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for a number of reasons. I think it's viscerally great. It's a horror movie. It's scary. Mm-hmm. It's a thriller. It's thrilling. It is very much those things, which is what you want out of that type of movie. It thematically, I think, is more interesting than many other versions of it could have been. You know what I mean?
That was the other. Yeah, I forgot to talk
Kind
about
of
that. Yeah, that's the other
refocusing the
thing.
story to be more about like abuse and like shitty relationships and things like that. I think was a nice twist, a nice take on the subject.
That's another
And
reason.
yeah, so I like, you know, that I think takes just kind of a pretty basic like invisible monster movie and takes it up a level, gives it a little more heft, a little more weight, more to kind of dig into. And then just it's so technically immaculate. You know, you can have a good story told poorly, a bad story told beautifully, and this is a good story told beautifully.
Yeah. On the note on the themes of the movie and that thing, I think you're right. I think that might be the reason why it's elevated so much, is because like a good horror movie is taking realistic concerns or problems and then creating an actual monster around it. And this movie does a good job of doing that in very obvious ways, but also in ways that reinforce that are constantly reinforced throughout the movie. So yeah, that I
well,
think
it's like
I think that's the other thing that helps to elevate it a lot.
absolutely, because I think the thing with horror movies is that, and the reason why there's like this, people really, at least media or critics have this affection for quote unquote like elevated or highbrow horror movies,
Yeah.
is that I think generally, you know, for a horror or monsters are not scary on their own
Right.
because they're not real. Like no one's watching Pacific Rim and shaking in their boots, thinking like, "Oh gosh, this giant alien laser lizard is terrifying." It would be terrifying if it was real, but it's not.
Right.
It's just, oh, look at this incredibly deadly engine of destruction. Isn't that cool? But the way a good horror movie is going to frame its monster, no matter how unrealistic or unusual it is it'll ground it in some kind of real life concern. And the instant you can make it relatable like that, it becomes scary. Which is why I think a lot of the, like, you know, a lot of the highbrow horror movies or the more thematically thoughtful horror movies can sometimes be the more scary ones, is because they are able to make what is a pretty outlandish thing, an invisible man or whatever, relatable enough for the audience to feel the fear of the characters.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge. I think like Invisible Man actually has rewatchability for me. I really liked Hereditary when it came out. Another movie that kind of has that. I was not big on Midsummer.
Yeah, neither.
And
was
so
I.
like I think there's a point where it becomes too like try hard prestige, and I feel like Midsummer was that. But I feel like Invisible Man hits that perfect sweet spot where it's like it's acute onto how realistic it is and all of that stuff. And it also has a little bit of the Kojima thing going, because I was just thinking about how like the invisible suit is like, it's so ridiculous and it's so dumb. But I can imagine like Elizabeth Moss going into a codec conversation and like all of a sudden Colonel Campbell appears and it's like, or Hal Emmerich appears and it's like, it uses optical cameras on top of the suit as well as mini projection units that create a 360-degree angle to represent the blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, this is a little Hideo Kojima. It's got everything I need. It's got sci-fi. It's got horror. It's got, you know, thriller aspects. It's got moments where you get to really cheer for the main character. And then it's got a little bit of sinisterness at the end where Sinister Man dies and is replaced by Sinister Woman. So,
yeah. It's really, really good. And yeah, I do like how it's got just very subtle little science fiction elements woven in. And yeah, like the suit is very, you could definitely see a codec conversation about how it works, which would end with Snake going,
if you hit the sensors or replace your hands with someone else's hands, you should be able to disrupt it.
Snake,
yeah.
if you, by pressing the triangle button, you should be able to disrupt the cameras in the suit, making the enemy visible for a short time.
You mean this isn't? You mean this isn't the pizza? This isn't Pizza Hut? God damn it! The other thing is just quickly on the suit is even though it looked science fictiony and stuff, it actually also did a good job of like looking kind of creepy and monstery and not just like ridiculous and goofy, which it very easily could have.
Definitely.
So, good.
Because all
good
the cameras
shit.
look like little eyes, which is, a nice touch.
And the sound design too, the little. It's like, oh,
Of
man,
them like opening of like the shutters and stuff. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, it's really
Oh,
cool.
The Invisible Man is such a good movie. More people should see it.
They should. And again, HBO. Oh, which leads me to, do you have anything to say on Invisible Man, or I want to talk a little bit about HBO Max quickly? I know we're
No, I'm done with
really
Invisible
coming up
Man.
against it.
It's awesome.
It is so good, and everyone should see it. Get to know what good horror is like, as well as good thrillers. HBO Max. This is gonna sound kind of weird, but I feel very conflicted on HBO Max. Although HBO Max, if you want to sponsor our podcast, please do so. And here's why: because I think that there's a lot of crap that's on HBO Max, but I think that there's also a lot of amazing stuff on it. So I didn't know going in that HBO Max had all the Adult Swim stuff, which I don't necessarily care about, all the Cartoon Network stuff, which I don't really care about. Obviously, it has all the HBO stuff, which, at the price point it's given, that's probably more than enough because HBO has a lot of, quality content in general, and then added onto it.
One quick thing on that.
Yeah.
HBO Max costs the same as the HBO edition for most cable packages. So it's the same either way. And if you get the cable package, like my parents had HBO cable for ages, and I would watch, the full library of HBO content on HBO Go, which has been dispensed with at this point.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So they got rid of HBO Go. HBO Max is now the thing. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot. They got a lot of stuff on there. And it's also, HBO has this weird habit of like, they'll license a bunch of movies for maybe like a month or two. And then, license a new set of movies after that. But they're all framed the same way. So they'll have some very good movies, and they'll have some kind of whatever movies, and then they'll have like Stephen Gaggen's Doolittle. But the way they advertise it, they're all advertised as like prestige quality cinema. And it's like, you can't be putting Hell or High Water and Doolittle in the same promo. I'm sorry. You can't.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's kind of like weird is I get why they wanted to do HBO Max instead of like Warner Brothers Water Tower Service or something like that. But I'm worried that it cheapens the original content branding of HBO. Like usually if it's an HBO series or an HBO documentary series, there's going to be a certain level of care and love and all of that sloppy, dopey stuff put in to make sure that it's at somewhat of a decent to high quality. But I'm worried that the HBO Max original series, they're going to have HBO on it, but they're going to be, pieces of shit. So that's my concern, is that the quality control is going to go. But it also has Turner Classic Movie, and it has Studio Ghibli. And so for me, like between the actual good HBO content, the Warner Brothers content that they already have on there and that they're going to add, the Turner Classic Movie stuff, which they even have a section that's like Film School 101, and it has stuff all the way up until like the 90s for like Turner Classic Movie stuff. Like I really like what HBO Max is doing in theory. The execution of HBO Max, I don't know if you ran into this, but the player itself is sort of bare bones, and it's like, okay, you play and you have like a play button and a fast forward button. It's the HBO
Go player. Yeah,
and the HBO Go player wasn't the best. Like there would be times I would start it up and the movie wouldn't start. So it's glitchy. And so I really like HBO Max, but I was having a lot of issues with it yesterday, which I kind of expected. Yesterday being December 31st. I expected it because everyone was going to be watching. Probably everyone's going to save Wonder Woman to watch then if they hadn't watched it. And
Yeah.
if they had, then, check out some other HBO offerings.
Well, when I watched Wonder Woman, it had some major technical issues. Like, it would buffer from like randomly in the middle of shots and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole single take scene in Invisible Man where like the Invisible Man is like dismembering or killing all of those cops. That was buffering so hard that we had to shut down the PlayStation, boot it back up so we got more bandwidth, and then play that whole scene over again so we could see how it actually looked and not how it looked if you were pressing pause every 30 seconds or 5 seconds actually.
Bad. I didn't run into any technical issues with the Invisible Man actually.
Yeah, that's good. I think you probably watched it at a time that was good for watching it. So like that's my only thing about HBO Max is just like Wonder Woman 1984, great concept, poor execution.
Yeah.
But if HBO can get some of that stuff stabilized, or Warner Media can get that stuff stabilized, like, I mean, I almost don't even. I would say it's one of the better online services out there, just especially for movie watchers who want a lot of like pretty good content. So yeah. That's my review of HBO Max. You have anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
No? All right. Well, we do have a new email address for the podcast.
Shit, we do?
We do. Podcast at underthewheels.com.
Hey, very cool.
Austin was so mad that we were using Under the Wheels podcast at gmail.com that he was like, no, we need a dedicated one. And, he delivered.
Nice.
Yeah. And on top of that, all of our reviews, you can read them at underthewheels.com. Some really good content. I'm a big fan, Gabe, that you do post reviews on there pretty often, especially of movies that we may or may not talk about on the podcast. Because your reviews make me want to watch those movies. So you keep doing that. Austin's posted more content on the site, and Austin's kind of tricky when it comes to his articles because he posts something that seems very clickbaity and kind of like, oh no. But then like as you read it, it's actually, he brings up really good points and really interesting things. So, he's one of those guys that like, it can help. You can get a little bit more context about a lot of the goings-ons of the rumors and pop culture things. Underthewheels.com. Austin's been trying to cover more of that stuff lately.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as where we can listen to it, go ahead.
Make sure to check out the website. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. That's right. We have a Twitter now.
Yeah. That's right.
And subscribe on YouTube. Also, whatever medium you're listening to this podcast on, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, whatever, please be sure to like or leave a rating and review. We'd really appreciate it. And yeah.
Music by Mike.
Music by Mike, as always.
Yeah, as always. No, I think that's everything. Actually, what I thought would be kind of one good movie and one fine movie turned out to be 2 recommendations from us. One significantly more recommended than the other, but both on HBO Max right now, so go give them a watch. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And you've just been Under the Wheels. So when I was growing up, we used to go to a Christmas Eve sermon, which was always my favorite sermon. I think that's the reason a lot of people are just like twice a year church going Christians, because like the Christmas Eve sermon is like
Easter.
Yeah, although the only Easter sermon I liked was like the sunrise one that I could never get up for, so I was just like, yeah, that's led me on my road to secularism. No, I celebrate the secular holiday of Christmas, where it's like, oh yeah, Santa's fun, and not like Jesus Christ was born to save your sins, praise him and not God. Like,
oh yeah. I mean, Christmas here is also pretty secular, but it's just like I don't know, we have like a set of traditions we do every single year, and it is unchanging, and it's yeah, and that's part of the fun of it, and things like it. Just gets harder to find gifts for people every year, so it's like, Jesus Christ. I'm a really like shitty gift giver,
or
at least I'm a very unconfident gift giver, so This year was actually the first year that like I got everyone something with any sort of conviction that like,
nice.
oh yeah, this is good. They're gonna like this. In previous years, it's like I have no idea what to get anyone. I hope they don't hate it.
I started asking for like socks, you know, like both like really nice dress socks and also like video game character socks because, you know,
Good
I'm
Lord.
that kind of a man child. And I just love getting socks now and wearing like weird socks, which sucks because I don't go anywhere. So I basically put on like goofy feeling socks just because I like to wear them and stare at them while I'm not working. So it turns into like
Jesus.
this weird
Yeah,
thing.
I'm
but,
still
you
a
know.
child at heart. Like I want toys for Christmas. If you get me socks, that's
Socks
just
are my new
wrong.
toys. I'm an old geezer now. I need my old geezer toys. I mean, I still ask for toys, mostly movies, but like I'll have like the Loop Deck, the big keyboard, the $250 editing keyboard. It's just like gonna stay on my Amazon wish list until either I buy it or someone is like, "Fine, Matt, take it."
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's like back in
Well,
the
I mean
day, it
that
was
counts
so
as
easy.
a toy in my book.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm. But all my toys are expensive now. You know.
Well, it's called being an adult. I mean, even children's toys are expensive now. My brother was looking at Legos a few weeks ago, and
Yeah,
they're all
that
absurd.
shit's
Because I remember,
expensive.
like, you know, back in say 2005, for the sake of argument, you know, you could get like a little Lego set to give as a small gift for like $7. You know,
Yeah,
and
not
now
anymore.
it's just. Because it used to be like the measuring stick I always used to use. I used to get these big catalogs of like new upcoming Lego sets in the mail. The way I would kind of measure if they were overpriced or not is my yardstick was it's like the average Lego set was about 10 cents a piece. So if it was more than that, it was overpriced. If it was under than that, it was a steal. And yeah, now it's just, you know, we're talking like 20, 25 cents a piece at this point.
Oh, I never thought of pricing it like that. I mean, the sets themselves have like some of them have become more complex and fun. But I mean, like, you know, I'm a sellout and I bought the Slave 1 Lego set, the big collector Slave 1 that's like $200 and it took me a week to build. Oh, it was so
Actually,
fun.
you
And
know,
so worth it.
honestly, I can't. That does sound like a lot of fun.
Finished.